Check, check, just doing a sound check. Looks good.
Oh, okay. How's my sound, Sarah?
You sound great to me. Everything looks good.
Okay.
The stream looks good, and get my minutes. Okay.
Okay, so I will call the May regular meeting to order of the Jones LLC. And Sarah, do you want to take the roll?
Yes. Bowman,
Present.
Boyd. I don't see her yet. Or is she here?
I don't see her yet.
Okay. Bugs.
Present.
Brenda Prado.
Not yet.
Okay. Cresswell.
Here.
Hernandez.
I don't think Jose will be here tonight.
Okay.
Meet themselves.
Hillbrands.
Here.
Thank you. Ma here. Martin Sec.
Here.
MacArthur. Okay, I see Menjivar.
Present.
Powers.
Here.
Zen. Serna Prado.
Here.
Is Rachel here? All right, so if you see Rachel come in or Denia, let me know the time, and then and Jose is sick. Okay. Wait, I'll make a motion actually to amend the agenda to put the fee discussion as part of the budget discussion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. We do a roll call. I have to do a roll call twice. I see Rachel joined. Hi, Rachel. Okay. So this is a roll call to vote to amend the agenda to put the fee discussion with the budget discussion. Bowman,
Yay.
Boyd, Bugs,
Yes.
Serna Prado,
Yes.
Cresswell,
Yes.
Hillbrands,
Yeah.
Ma, yay, Martin Sec,
Yes.
MacArthur.
Yes.
Okay. Menjivar.
Just for a point of clarification, the fee discussion is going to be a separate topic, but with the budget discussion.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Powers,
Yes.
Zen.
Yes.
Okay. So we amended that part. Now we have to approve the amended agenda. So I make a motion to approve. I see Denia joined at 6:03. I make a motion to approve.
Second.
Okay. Bowman,
Yay.
Boyd,
Yay.
Bugs,
Yes.
Serna Prado,
Yes.
Cresswell,
Yes.
and Hillbrands.
Yeah.
Ma is yay. Martin Sec.
Yes.
MacArthur,
Yes.
Menjivar,
Yeah.
Powers,
Yes.
Zen.
Yes.
Okay, so the amended agenda was approved with 12 out of 12 votes. Now it's apologies for all of these minutes, but we have to approve 5 sets of minutes. I'll do it as 3 motions. One is it's per date. Okay, so I'll make the first motion, which is to approve the minutes from the April 13th, 2021 LSC regular meeting. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, roll call Bowman,
Yay.
Boyd,
Yay.
Bugs,
Yes.
Serna Prado,
Yes.
Cresswell,
Yes.
Hernandez. Oh, I'm sorry. Hillbrands,
Yay.
yay, Martinsek,
Yes.
MacArthur.
Yeah.
Menjivar,
Yes.
Powers,
Yes.
Zen.
Yes.
Yes, those are approved with 12 out of 12 votes. I will now make a motion to approve the minutes from the April 19th, 2021 LSC special meeting, both open and closed minutes.
Second.
Powers second. Okay, so roll call Bowman,
Yes.
Boyd,
Yay.
Bugs,
Yes.
Serna Prado,
Yes.
Cresswell,
Yes.
Hillbrands,
Yay.
yay, Martinsek,
Yes.
MacArthur,
Yes.
Menjivar,
Yes.
Powers,
Yes.
Zen.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Now I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from the April 26th, 2021 LSC special meeting, both open and closed minutes.
Second.
Roll call Bowman,
Yes.
Boyd,
Yay.
Bugs,
Yes.
Serna Prado,
Yes.
Cresswell,
Yes.
Hillbrands,
Yay.
yay, Martinsek,
Yes.
MacArthur,
Yes.
Menjivar,
Yes.
Powers,
Yay.
Zen.
Yes.
Okay, that's 12 out of 12. All right, I'll hand it over to Cassie for public participation.
Thanks, Sarah. For public participation, I will keep an eye on the time for you, but listen out when I signal that you're close to your 3 minutes. We have a long agenda, and we also have quite a few people signed up. First is listed Peter Barash.
Yeah, that's Peter Barish. He can't attend, but he sent me his quick thing. I'll just read it. Sorry, let me pull it up. It's very short. That's so quick. All right. Okay, his comment is he has an incoming freshman. I believe he has an existing student, potentially a sophomore. Here's his comment. After 2 disrupted years, the incoming freshmen desperately want the opportunity to have something that feels normal. Transitioning to high school is hard enough in a normal year. Freshman Connection is a highly successful endeavor to ease that anxiety and allow kids to start making connections with other students. Virtual Freshman Connection cannot provide the same experience. With the announcement that incoming freshmen can start getting vaccinated beginning this week, it is essential that Jones make Freshman Connection entirely an in-person event or minimally offer that as an option to those who want it. With Freshman Connection 2.5 months away, there's no reason Jones cannot make this happen. Falling back on previously determined strategy where the COVID circumstances have changed dramatically is denying these kids the opportunity for a normalcy they deserve for no reason. We know how to do in-person safely now. Thank you.
Thanks. We will go to Daniel Andrade next. And I think Daniel has a collaborative statement with Lin Cow and also with Cole Francis. Is that right? The 3 of you are giving a collaborative statement together? Okay, great. And so I can just, you can just use your total time among the 3 of you. So that's great. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, LSC members, Jones faculty, staff, parents, and students. My name is Daniel Andrade, and I'm here representing the Association of Latin American Students. I am joined by Lin Chow, representing the Asian American Club, and Cole Francis, representing the Black Coalition. Today, we are here to read a joint statement from our 3 clubs.
We understand what being minority students at Jones entails. It's a constant struggle that wears patience thin and makes one feel small. It's learning to live in a community that does not prioritize the emotional well-being of their students and families of color. When we ask for change and demand action, it often feels like we are screaming into a void where our wants and needs become obscured and our voices dampened. We've been here before. This is not the first time AAC, ALAS, and the Black Coalition have put forth a joint statement. This may not be the last, but our motivations are different this time. We acknowledge that the school has made steps through the equity plan to better the school culture and make the Jones community a more inclusive place. However, there's still a lot of work to be done.
The current LSC is doing their best to make sure the school is fulfilling their promises while continuing to advocate on behalf of BIPAC students and families. Yet for some reason, they're receiving criticism and backlash from staff, past alumni, and parents within the Jones community. It is extremely hurtful seeing the community that loves to claim us for our identities actively work against efforts to include us. As Asian, Black, and Latinx students, we would like to thank the LSC and stand in solidarity with their efforts.
As Asian, Black, and Latinx students, we are voicing our need for translated documents. We've heard it time and time again that Jones is an inclusive environment, but how is that possible when you're limiting the ability of non-English proficient families to be able to communicate and interact in this environment? When emergencies and threats happen in and around the building, such as the lockdown 2 years ago or the shooting threat last year, our parents, our families are left in the dark, often fearing the worst for our safety because they are only able to decipher the most dangerous words. It is unacceptable in a school that loves to boast about its diversity. Claiming the title of a diverse student body means claiming the responsibilities of having a diverse student body. Any document, any email, any survey, anything that is sent out to our parents in English has to be at least translated into Spanish and Mandarin, as those have the greatest needs. This is the bare minimum. The expectation is that any language that is necessary should be translated as per the English LEP parent fact sheet provided by the Department of Justice and Education.
As Asian, Black, and Latinx students, we notice the disparities amongst the types of students taking AP classes. The reason many avoid certain classes is because those classroom environments have made us uncomfortable. We look out for each other and share which classes and teachers to avoid because certain classrooms foster exclusion. No one wants to sit in a classroom for 90 minutes, 2 to 3 days a week, where they're constantly experiencing microaggressions. Advertisement is not the issue. We know these classes exist. What is needed is a change of culture. We know that teachers are undergoing anti-racist training, and this is a start, but that's all it is. We ask that the efforts to change the school culture persist after this year.
As Asian, Black, and Latinx students, we are disappointed in the lack of cohesion regarding teachers and staff's response to the murder of Adam Toledo, the continued murder of Black Americans at the hands of police, and the increase in hate crimes against the Asian American Pacific Islander community. While some of us received acknowledgement in class from a few teachers, those instructors are outliers. Many of us received no acknowledgement of the pain our communities are facing. Many of us receive no acknowledgement because teachers are receiving no instruction on how to handle these topics and whether they should even address these matters. It results in students feeling isolated and like we have to deal with these matters alone. We acknowledge that the administration has taken steps to change the way the school approaches these issues. However, no matter how unintentional, there remain many gaps in the approach. We often still feel left unheard. Part of decolonizing the curriculum is acknowledging what happens outside of the classroom. All of these issues have been brought up by the LSC and others before. We greatly appreciate that the LSC has listened to students of color and are actively working to make Jones the inclusive environment that is advertised, yet not experienced by all. Nothing is lost if the LSC is given a chance to push the school in the right direction. We as a community must all come together to create real change so students of color at Jones can feel like they belong.
On behalf of the Asian American Club, Association of Latin American Students, and the Black Coalition, we would like to thank you for your time. And once again, we would like to thank the LSC for keeping our interest in mind. Thank you and have a great evening. We cede the rest of our time.
thank you, students, for that, for the support and for that statement. Our next speakers, sorry, let me find my,
It's Lance Marco.
thanks, Sarah.
You know what? I'm currently commuting right now. Can you skip me and then come back to me? I'll be available in about 10 minutes. Thank you.
Yes, thanks. And
It looks like the next one is Laura Brower. Laura?
Yeah, so I just unmute myself. You can hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Hi, my name's Laura Brower. I have I had two daughters that I have a junior, currently a junior, and a daughter who graduated 2 years ago. And I've been on the Friends of Jones board for the past 6 years. And I wanted to thank the LSC for volunteering their time, because I do know how important it is to a school to have volunteers. So, you know, I appreciate that. I guess the main thing that I really wanted to talk about was the formatting of these meetings. I'm confused, and I'm relatively new to the LSC meetings. And so I'm just wondering, when we ask these questions at the beginning of each of these meetings and they're not answered, I'm assuming that they're all answered, but I'm not 100% sure, because I can't sometimes last through to the end of the meeting. So I'm wondering if the format can change at all. And that, you know, I understand that a lot of people ask questions, and I'm wondering if there can be a back and forth. Maybe that can be included in the 3 minutes. Since you guys are taking time to answer these, maybe we combine those times. But it just seems to me to be just very confusing. I don't feel like it really honors people's time. And I just feel like the format kind of creates problems and sometimes anger, that people feel like they have to get everything out right away, and there's no back and forth. I feel like there's a huge disconnect between the LSC and the community. And you know, just like these students just talked, it would be nice to have some answers. It'd be nice to understand it more, to understand what it is exactly that's happening, because everybody's just guessing. Is it teachers? Is it like, what's going on? And I feel like this is very, very confusing. I feel like it's not being transparent. It's just anger, and it's not working with the administration. And as far as I know, there's no working with the administration. Maybe there is. Things seem to be very confusing around these meetings. They run very, very long. I've tried to get, people have called me and said, you know, what are they like? Can I, you know, participate? I invite them, you know, people in the community. And when they find out that they're so long, they're like, I can't do it. You know, I got families, I've got responsibilities, I have work. So I'm just wondering if there is another way to do this, where we don't load up on all these questions. Maybe we do some questions in the beginning, they're answered in one, you know, after the other. And then maybe we do some questions towards the end or in the middle, or, you know, I just think that this.
Hi, Laura, you're close to 3 minutes.
Okay, but I'm saying this just doesn't feel good as a member of this community. I just think you guys need to know that. Thank you.
Thanks. We have next.
Jackie Thompson.
Sorry.
Hi there. I'm sorry, we're finishing our dinner, so I wanted to get on and talk to everybody, and I'm glad I followed Laura, because I'm kind of continuing what she said. My daughter is a senior now at Jones. I've always been very active in LSCs for her and for my son, who's 14. And this one has really kind of pulled me aback. I also have seen some of these meetings go for hours, which has just been, to me, absolutely not respectful of the administration who's working all day or the parents. And because of that, I've also, and I haven't been as involved as I wanted to be because of it. And then saw things come up like the letter to CPS, which really didn't reflect myself or so many other parents that I knew. And I do feel, like I said, I've been part of 4 different LSCs now. And this one, I feel that, and it's not, believe me, I appreciate any volunteer effort on behalf of parents. It's wonderful. But I do think it needs to be more of an open forum and something which takes everybody into account, not just the elected members. And again, something that really kind of honors. I mean, we had with the school my son goes to, with the school my daughter went to before, we had a very simple 1.5 hours in and out, no matter what. And, that is something I just think is important. And, but I do want to say, because I know I'm running out of time, that, in terms of school organizations, I mean, Jones has been wonderful for us. Absolutely wonderful. I'm sad that my daughter, is leaving now after a year like this. But we are so excited, and the administration has been amazing in working with us so that we could get the prom at Soldier Field. And I'm not the prom at Soldier Field. I'm sorry, guys. The graduation at Soldier Field. And now we're working on prom. And, even with all the craziness of bringing the kids back to school, thank God, Dr. Plunkett, Mr. Mishanowski, Dr. Powers was out, so I can't cite him, Mr. Mitchell, have put in so much time to allow all these things to be done. And I can't thank you all enough. I mean, there are just hordes of parents that feel the same way. So that's just something, again, we're kind of dead men walking because obviously our daughter is leaving Jones, but I just think it's something that should be a consideration of the LSC moving forward, because I always look at the LSC as my voice, as my voice and other parents' voices. And there is, I think, a disconnect is a perfect word. So it's just something, again, it's not to come on to criticize, because my real reason to come on was just to say thank you all, as far as the administration and FOJ, for your help in at least being able to salvage this year for our kids. So thank you guys for letting me speak.
Thanks, Jacqueline. Okay, next, Mary Catherine Marco. Oops, are you there, Mary Catherine? I see you there, but you are not unmuted. Did Erica Washington join the Zoom? No. And Lance, are you ready to speak? Okay, so we can't get a hold of them. LSC, we can talk about the response to previous comments. Oh,
I'm Mary Catherine's on. I'm sorry.
okay.
I had tech. Can I go?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Mary Catherine Marco, and I have 2 boys at Jones. One graduated 2 years ago, and I have a senior. My family has been in CPS since pre-K. I've been active at every school, and now I'm on Friends of Jones. 13 years ago, my girlfriend worked at CPS, and she would observe CPS teachers, and she's mentioned Jones College Prep. I never heard of the school. She said, you just wait. One day, the school is going to be top notch because they have a new principal. And boy, was she right, because we sure are a top notch school. And Dr. Powers put us on the map of the city, not just the city, but of the country. And you'll find that out when you're applying to colleges and your kids get accepted. That's when you'll know what Dr. Powers did. When we walked into the open house 7 years ago, we heard Dr. Powers speak, and we knew this was our school. He was approachable. He was a kind man. He fostered an environment for my kids to excel, not only in the classroom, but outside as well. My boys had a wonderful experience with athletics at Jones. They both played 4 years of basketball and baseball. And athletics at our school is a tremendous part of high school. Our sports teams are very inclusive. They discourage cuts and they welcome kids to be a part of the team. This is very important for kids to be a part of some team in the school. One thing I can say is my kids made wonderful friends from their teammates and will remain friends with them in the future. I loved watching these teammates grow into young men over the year. They sure were one big happy family. This is also another part of education, which is just as important as the classroom instruction. What they have learned from these teams is priceless. Jones Sports provided a safe place for our kids. And maybe I'm on a different thing, but for the budget, I really would like you to all take a look at the sports because that is a very important part of CPS and of our school. And not only did I have my children have wonderful families, but I also had great friends and families. We spent time driving kids to the west side, to the south side, to pick everybody up to go to the games. And this was something that was very important. And I grew up in the city and I went to Catholic schools and I thought my kids, I would never let them step in CPS, but I was very, very happy with my kids' education. So on behalf of, I'm very sad because I'm leaving the school, but I just want to let you know that my experience was wonderful, as my children's experience was wonderful. And I can't say enough about the faculty. And I know the LSC, it's very hard what you're doing. It's a volunteer. I've been volunteering for the last 18 years. But also too, going back to sports, we do need a budget for sports because we need more school spirit in the sports. And I feel if we have more help, there's more things that can be done instead of everyone fundraising from, the FOJ to the parents.
Thanks,
So,
Mary Catherine. You're
all
at
right.
2 minutes. If you
Thanks
can wrap it
again,
up.
everybody.
Thanks. And Lance, do you want to go now?
Sure.
Okay.
Thanks for accommodating me.
No problem.
I was curious, I want to second, Laura Brower's comments. I think that they're spot on as far as kind of a different format that the LSC might consider following. I have just a couple questions. I think it was really exciting news that Jones was not only number 3 in the city and state, but 57 nationally. And I was curious what the LSC is planning on doing for powers and staff in achieving this unbelievable accomplishment. Another comment is as far as I thought that this LSC, this current board, several members kind of ran on a policy of transparency and communication. And I had sent an email to Cassie asking what the current parent LSC members were, whether they had children that had gone through Jones or what year their child was enrolled, because especially now with COVID, how could someone get a true understanding of what Jones is about if no one even attended school for the last year and a half? Unfortunately, I didn't receive a response. I mean, I do have an idea of some members, that there's several, I guess, freshmen, but I really don't know. I was kind of left in the dark. But lastly, along those lines, I was wondering how I could propose an amendment for the bylaws in the elections of an LSC. And I guess that's more of a CPS type of issue, where in order to become a parent member of the board, they would have to have a student that's either enrolled as a sophomore or older. So those are my comments. I'd love to hear some feedback, but I guess that's not part of the agenda. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Lance. I would say I did actually email you back when you sent that question, just for the record. We'll address that more in a second. I don't see our last speaker on here. So I think I sent her the link though, so I can hold her to the end. To address your question, Lance, I'm not happy giving out information about my fellow LSC members that they don't want to share. I have a freshman, and I did send you that. I would be happy to talk more about that with you. Yes, for LSC members that are parent reps, you have to have a child enrolled in the school. There's not a restriction on the grade that your child is. If the other members who are parents want to mention their students, they can. I will call on Sarah. Go ahead.
Hi, hi Lance and everyone. First, I wanted to acknowledge the students who spoke. I really appreciate your comment and sending your comment in advance. That's always appreciated as secretary. And Daniel, I really look forward to working with you on the LSC next year. I think you're going to be a very dynamic contributor, and I'm excited to work with you. Regarding the meeting format, a lot of LSCs will put the public comments at the very end of the meeting. When I joined the LSC, I recommended that we put them at the beginning because it's many LSCs have quite long meetings because we only meet one time a month. And as Danaya had mentioned in a previous meeting when the same issue was brought up, this LSC is getting a lot, it might be longer, but we are doing a lot of work. I do recommend, we do send out a monthly communication by email. One was sent out yesterday, so we are communicating that way. And I think in this virtual format, that having like a back and forth or response is just a little bit more challenging than if we were all in the same room. And I do know that as an LSC member for a long time, and to answer your question, I have a freshman, but I've been an LSC member. This would be my 5th year at various LSCs. And as far as experience in a school, I think it's more experience with having a wide variety of experience. We have people that have had students in the school for a very long time. We have newer parents, so we're representing all stakeholders. And we have parents that have a lot of experience with school code and the LSC guide, and others that are brand new from the community. So I think it's a good balance. It is a 13-member committee. And then there was one more thing about amending. You know, my recommendation is to run for LSC, and then LSC AB is another LSC CAB, or however it's said. If you're looking to get more into the policy aspect of LSCs, I highly recommend that. And thank you very much for everyone who spoke tonight.
Thanks, Sarah. Rachel, I see your hand up next.
I'll make it quick since we have been talking about meeting length, but I wanted to thank everyone for speaking tonight and also say that this is democracy in action. And I just want to say first, thank you to the students who just thanked the LSC, and I'll say the entire LSC in that statement, it seemed, for the work that's being put in these meetings. And I'm a little disappointed that, to be honest, the parents that spoke didn't acknowledge that, just being completely honest, because I think I'm trying to think about what everyone is saying at all times. Also, to the point about the meeting format, if you've ever been to a city meeting to advocate for something, in particular, for example, in front of the Chicago Board of Education, the vast majority of people who try to speak at those meetings don't even get the chance to. They try to sign up. And so the fact that everyone is able to speak at these meetings, I think, is a testament to the power of local school councils and their efficacy. And they have been in place since before 1988, but most powerfully since 1988. So I just want to say this is the format of the LSCs, and I'm interested in reforming them, and I'm interested in having that conversation, but I just wanted to put that out there.
Thanks, Rachel. Danaya?
Yeah, so I just wanted to quickly say 2 things. The first is that, like Sarah already pointed out, I think we're getting a lot more done in these meetings than we usually, or than we got done maybe last year in last year's LSC. So if there are calls for the meetings to be shorter, what will be being asked for is going to either be more shorter length meetings or to get less done. And I think that parents need to take that into account. I think that the LSC does make an active effort to post our minutes, post our agendas, and post like everything that happens in the meeting so that people who can't make it can understand what's going on in the meetings. And so I think that's like a resource that we put out. And I also wanted to say on the point of parents' experience and things like that. One, I wanted to say that we have community members who are community members but don't have any parents, don't have any students at the school, aren't teachers, aren't in the building, but they still have a perspective that is valuable to the school. So that's one thing. But also, and I said this before, the LSC doesn't make decisions based on opinion. We make decisions based on the feedback that we get from the community. So even if a parent has only been here for a year or less, their perspective and the work that they do isn't based on that. It's based on what the community is telling them. So I just don't want us to be basing like parents on this council's worth on how old their child is or how long they've been at Jones, because that doesn't really make much sense, and it just doesn't really get to like the point of the LSC. I also wanted to give a really, really big thank you to my fellow students who came and spoke. It really meant a lot. So thank you.
Thanks, Danaya. Dr. Powers, hand up next.
Yes, thank you. A couple of things that came up during public comments. I wanted to mention that with regard to Freshman Connection, we are not going to do exclusively a remote or virtual Freshman Connection. We are working on an expanded in-person Freshman Connection. It may not be the same scope as we have had previously pre-pandemic, but it will involve students being in the building. We have not worked out the details of this. It is likely to be during the last 2 weeks of July. So we are working on that right now to see how that will work with regard to the restrictions that we still do have in place at that time. And secondly, when our students presented earlier, one of the things that was mentioned was translation. We are working very hard, especially Mr. Hilbrands, to provide translations on anything that is going out from the school. We are working toward that, and hopefully we'll start having that as a complete reality as we move into the future. We also have a line item in the budget for interpreter services so that we will have resources to be able to pay interpreters during actual parent meetings or conferences with parents. So just a couple of things to follow up on those comments.
Thanks, Dr. Powers. Danaya, did you have another comment?
That was an old hand, sorry.
Old hand. Violet?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo sentiments about the strength and vulnerability that was taken by 3 BIPOC students at Jones. I just, to you and the entire BIPOC community at Jones, your experiences are valid and they're heard. And as somebody who attended a selective enrollment high school and had very, very similar experiences, that fire in your belly is going to be the reason why you achieve so many great things. I have like a lot of emotions, so try to keep it short and succinct. But I really wanted to applaud you all for that. And it was interesting for me to see the follow-up comments, right? Like not everybody's experience is the same. And that is valid, and that shouldn't take away and is not going to take away from everybody's individual experience. And I think that I'm excited to see where you all go with that. And I'm going to stop there because I don't know what else to say, but I really appreciate you all.
Thanks, Violet. And Roberto?
Hello, can you hear me? Thank you. To the students that spoke today, just like Violetta mentioned, I really do appreciate your voice, your strength, your courage to speak out in an environment that doesn't see you. And I want you to know that I see you. I hear you, I value you, and this is why I joined the LSC, is to amplify your voice, to ensure that you are receiving equitable access to the vast opportunities and resources that the school has to offer, not just the few. And like a particular teacher has mentioned, this is the Rolls Royce of public schools, of CPS, and you should be able to drive that car. And this is not the first statement that our students of color have made to the LSC, to this LSC, to the past LSC in July of 2020. ALAS, the Asian American Club, and the Black Student Union issued a statement regarding uplifting the respective minority groups, and oftentimes we serve as safe havens from the racist environments at Jones. And then in February of 2021, the Black Coalition issued their own statement. It is clear to me that their narratives are true, that their lived experiences are true. And the data absolutely supports their narratives. When 57% of our Black freshmen are graduating with a GPA of 3.0 or above in 2018 to 2019, and 65% of our Latino freshmen are graduating with a GPA or ending their freshman year with a GPA of a 3.0, and 81% of our white freshmen are ending their freshman year with a 3.0. There are disparities, and the school must address them to narrow that gap. That is the CPS 5-year vision plan. That is the equity framework to ensure that the school is meeting every student's unique needs. And to the parent who's asking about my child, how dare you? That is uncalled for. For you to try to learn about my child is an intimidation tactic, and I will not accept that. I filled out my application, my form, submitted it to Jones administration. They then submitted it to the Office School of Local Council Relations and verified my information. I had to get fingerprinted, a background check, which everything has passed.
Thanks, Roberto. Anyone else have any additional comments? No, I'll take my turn as chair. Thank you again to those students. We really appreciate that you are willing to speak up, and you're willing to speak up more than once. And for the whole school community, I hope everyone can find the LSC webpage. It has the LSC email address. It has my email address. Please reach out. I don't have an office, but I have an open door policy. I'm happy to talk to people. We, to the best of our ability without paid staff, correspond. We have an Instagram feed and a Twitter feed, or not a Twitter feed, a Facebook page. So I think the majority of meetings are getting posted on there. And we're doing a once a month LSC update. And you can read the minutes from the meetings after they're approved. And you can also watch the videos of the meetings. So because of the pandemic, things are actually, I think, more accessible than they have ever been. So that is what the back and forth is with the public body. I think that's my response to that. If people do not have more questions on or comments on public participation, we will move on to the next item, which is Dr. Powers' principal report. Go ahead, Dr. Powers.
Thank you very much. Just a few quick things. We are showing a slight improvement in average daily attendance year to date. I think that is reflective of the return to partial in-person attendance. We have, to reiterate, that was something mentioned earlier, the America's Best High Schools ranking by U.S. News. This is our 13th year that we've been ranked, and this is the highest ranking we've received. Number 3 in Illinois, number 3 in Chicago, number 57 nationally is our highest ranking. And this is an achievement of our students, not just a handful of students, but our students across the board. I want to thank everyone for all their support that has made this possible, for the wonderful teachers we have, the hard work of our students, and the support of our parents. Last week was Teacher Appreciation Week. We enjoyed a number of different things in recognition of the work of our faculty and staff, and we're very proud of them. Just a quick announcement, this has gone out to all parents and all juniors as well. There is a junior essay writing workshop being sponsored by the counseling team. That information is available on the Counseling Corner. Also, we received preliminary information regarding our National Merit Scholarship Program. That's this year's juniors. We do not yet have names or the final word on that. That will come in the fall, in September. But we had 48 members of the class of 2022 who will be recognized as either commended students or National Merit semifinalists. And you may remember that this year's senior class had a record number of National Merit commended and semifinalist students, almost 60 total, with 27 National Merit finalists. So our students are doing extremely well, and we want to continue supporting all of our kids as we move forward. That pretty well concludes the principal's report.
Thanks. LSC, do you have questions for Dr. Powers on this? Ellen, did you want to do whatever question you had earlier? No, you're good. Okay.
It was more of just like a note that like I appreciate the virtual format of this, and I hope in the future that we're able to like maintain some level of like broadening of our voice because it's virtual. I mean, I've been going to LSC meetings at Jones for years. This is the most parents and the most students who I've seen come and speak. And so I just wanted to say that that's something that I have really appreciated regardless of the length of meetings. But I'm sorry, that's not really related to Dr. Bowers and the principal report, but thank you for asking.
And I'm just going to make a clarification note before we get into the budget. I'm going to ask that we do not use the chat because on YouTube it is in Spanish. And I just would rather us not use it unless we're sharing a link, and then I'll put the same link in the YouTube chat. Additionally, I will put a link in the YouTube chat for budget questions. It's a form. So if anyone listening has a question during the presentation or after the presentation, you can put your question in the form. This will allow us to, if we're not able to answer it tonight, we'll be able to answer it in the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. And I think then we can move on to item 5, item 6, the budget discussion. And Dr. Powers, you have slides that
Yes.
you're going to share?
Troy, are you able to bring up the deck that I had, or Jeremy, either one? Or I can try to find it.
It's in the folder, Troy.
Did you get the updated one?
Yes, it's the
If I
Google
change it-
Slide one you sent. Yes,
Yes,
I put that.
thank you.
I linked that into the folder. And Troy, if you bring up the one that says copy, then you'll have access unless you already have access.
Just give me 1 minute.
Let me just real quickly just preface this. What I'd like to do is very quickly go through just an overview of the budgeting process so that everybody who is present and was not participated in the town hall that we had a few weeks ago or the committee meeting, the budget committee meeting, you can get a little bit of more of a context for the budget and budgeting process. And then we'll go through a number of things that are the challenges we're facing as a school this year in the budget process. And finally, some of the steps we are taking to address those challenges, at least in terms of the information we have now, because we do have a couple of outstanding questions or outstanding issues that have to be resolved before we can actually finalize our budget proposal. I do think we have a solid budget proposal, and we will go to that as soon as we complete the discussion on the deck this evening. But at this particular time, there are probably going to be some things that we will be doing differently over the next couple of days, depending on additional information we have. And I'll talk more about that as we get into it. And I apologize for my voice. It's very hoarse today.
Do you find them, Troy?
This is the one you're talking about?
Is it it's Google Docs?
Yep.
I'm sorry. You know what I mean. Okay.
This is the one you're referring to though, right?
Yeah, they all kind of look the
yes.
same. So it's like, yeah.
I could go to the next slide. Thank you very much. Just real quickly, I want people to have a good picture of where the money is coming from, and then of course how we're handling it. It does come from multiple sources: the district, the state, and federal funds. Those all are under 115 lines. And then we have other income from school fees, school rentals, which of course we have no income and have not for 13 months in that area. And then various gifts and grants, including FOJ and other donors. Next slide, please. Basically, the most important source of our income are the student-based budget, line 15 funds. Each school receives the same allocation per pupil each year, or a different amount each year, but the same goes across the board per pupil. And that is $5,958.58 for SY 22. And there are different amounts for our cluster program students due to direct federal funding on that. Next slide, please. We also receive state supplemental aid, used to be called SGSA, now it's simply called SA. This comes from Illinois and is based on the number of students that we have who qualify for fee waivers, formerly known as free and reduced lunch. And that's 990 students per dollars per student. Next slide, please. We also have, for this coming year only, as far as we know at this time, we have additional discretionary, school discretionary allocations referred to as ADF. And these are designed to help meet our students' social and emotional needs, as well as addressing accelerating learning needs and possible learning loss due to the pandemic. And we received a per pupil allocation of $125. And again, as we know, as we believe at this time, this is for 1 year only for the coming fiscal year. We also have other sources, obviously, our general school fees, academic fees, athletic fees, and so forth. And these are all managed through our internal accounts. Next. The general school fees, formerly we call this the activity fee, but I think it's probably needed a more generic term in this case. Covers a wide range of costs which are reflected on our fee schedule, which we'll discuss later. These go directly, academic fees go directly to those departments, athletic fees to their sports, and families who qualify for fee waivers have their fees automatically adjusted. Next, please. We have a great building facility here, great location, generates a lot of money in rentals, except since March of 2020. And that's part of our major challenge right now, is to address the needs of our school, because we don't have this source of income, which has been very significant. Even if we do restart, and I want to make sure there's this caveat there, even if we restart rentals starting in August even, or September of the next school year, it will probably be a slow ramping up. We do not know if all of our prior clients come back, such as the churches and so forth, swim teams, that type of thing, but we are going to do our best, and that's primarily Mr. Hildebrand's responsibility to get out there and recruit people who really want to. In the past, we haven't had to recruit. The school spoke for itself, and we had lots of people who wanted to rent facilities or lease. That'll be a slow build up next year. I'm fairly confident. Next, please. And we receive gifts and grants, most notably through Friends of Jones, but also from other organizations at various times. And these are also managed through our internal accounts. Next, please. How are they allocated within the school? All the 115 funds are essentially encumbered to cover staffing costs. This has been the case for many years. In other words, without growing our staff, without a change in our number of students or relative stasis in that regard, we are still not receiving enough funds through the 115 lines to cover all the positions that we have at Jones. There are several positions that are covered by CPS centrally and are not part of our budget. That includes a principal position, one clerk, one counselor, diverse learners, teachers, and paraprofessionals, food service, custodians, engineers, and security. They are not part of our building budget. We also identify our department budgets and program budgets coming from our internal accounts, largely through student fees. And these are based on typical needs for the department or the program, can be supplemented as needed, as needs change, but also based on funds available to us. Up to this point, we've been fairly able to meet almost all of our department's needs and requests, but we may be looking at a little bit more belt tightening in the coming year. A lot depends on what happens as we move down the line here. Next, please. What challenges do we face? This is really the meat of what we're talking about. As I mentioned, our allocations in SBB and SA are inadequate for our staffing, and that is just with the staff we already have. One of the reasons for this, one of the major reasons for this, is the SBB amount per pupil reflected the 3% raise the teachers received, but it did not reflect lane and step increases and other costs related to our teaching staff, including some higher level teachers who received additional funds, additional steps and so forth. None of that was reflected in SBB this year. We also lost a half position for our English language learner, meaning that was a position that was previously paid for by CPS. Now we have to cover that position, and we will through our student-based budget. The shortfalls previously and for next year require us to utilize internal accounts, not only funds we currently have available, but funds we anticipate for the coming year. As you will see in our upcoming budget presentation in a few minutes, we do not we're not factoring in any income from rentals and leases because there's no way to estimate that. We do have estimates, however, for income from student fees. So we're going to need to be taking funds from internal accounts or funds coming up in the future for internal accounts to help cover our staffing needs and other needs. And the loss of rental income I've already mentioned. We don't know how soon that will be able to be recovered. Next, please. Several steps we're taking. We have appealed the SBB allocations through program support request to help offset this shortfall. And again, this is largely due to the increased cost for staffing without a parallel amount coming to us in SBB funds. We are going to be realizing savings through the hiring of a number of replacement teachers due to retirements and resignations of higher salaried teachers. People who have been with us a number of years, been with CPS for a number of years, can be replaced by teachers who are coming in either newer or with maybe less experience. We're blessed with a highly experienced staff, so talented newer teachers are much more readily available to us, and it's much more realistic for us to utilize them. We are facing a possible reduction, and I don't think this is going to be a serious issue, of half of one teaching vacancy that we presently have. That's based on curricular changes, and possibly we would be able to close the position entirely if class sizes are not negatively impacted. We also are looking at the possible closing of a staff position through attrition, or barring that, of closing a staff position outright, non-teaching position. We are also looking at possible alternative funding for an existing non-teaching position through the utilization of the ADF funds that I mentioned earlier, but those will not be available to us until the new fiscal year of July 1. Next slide, please. And this is our last slide here. We are also, again, looking at steps that we're involved with here that we're trying to utilize for savings and to kind of trim our budget deficits. We're eliminating or reducing some line items funded from internal accounts that have been either underutilized or are not currently needed. We're temporarily reducing other line items pending renewal of income through fees and rentals. In other words, some of the reductions that we have, if we are able to recoup some of the lost revenue we got from rentals and leases, we may be able to then provide additional support for those line items. We're looking at possible additional allocations through SBB based on our 10th day enrollment. Right now, our projected enrollment is based at 1,970 students. If we come in higher than that for each student, we'll receive that SBB amount. However, the more students we have above that, it may affect our staffing needs. So this is a balancing act we have to go through. And finally, we are going to have some difficulty, not finally the last page, finally the last point on that. Go back one, Troy. He's smiling. Anyway, we will not have our freshman numbers until after Friday. Friday is the deadline for freshmen to accept seats at Jones. And based on our selective enrollment and our CTE students, if they get those all in and we meet our goal of enrollment for freshmen of about 475, then we'll have a better idea of where we are with regard to the numbers of sections we're going to need. So that's kind of where we are leading into the actual budget itself. Anybody have any quick questions on any of that? It was a quick overview, but I wanted to provide the context for what we're talking about.
Yeah, super quick. Can you do the ADF, additional discretionary funds for an existing non-teaching position? I don't know what that is.
Well, we have received for this coming year, and basically all high schools have, we've received a pretty significant additional budget amount that is to be earmarked to support students in their social emotional learning and possible learning loss and other types of things that we can do to support them academically as well as social emotionally. That's going to require a person to head that up. And rather than hire somebody new from the outside who doesn't know the school, we're looking at reassigning that role to someone else. And that will become that person's primary portfolio for the coming year. And if it continues the following year, perhaps so. If it doesn't continue and our income is improved next year, then perhaps we'll be able to fund that position, resume funding that position through regular means.
Yeah, so it's kind of a way to pay for this position until we can recoup the rental income.
Basically, that's it, but also to satisfy an important need.
Yes.
The funds are rather generous for next year, and we're going to make very good use of them, but we need to have somebody to serve as a point person for it. Any other quick questions?
Rachel?
Yeah, this may be premature, but I'm just wondering, maybe we'll get to talking about this in a little bit, but just this first point, eliminating or reducing line items that are underutilized or no longer needed. I was just like, is there an example of that? I'm just trying to.
Well, each year what we've done, and again, I don't want to get too deeply into the weeds, but each year we try to use essentially a baseline budgeting process. In other words, whatever a department or program had the previous year, we tend to use the same amount, but we have found that over the years, in many cases, not all, but in many cases, those funds have been underutilized the way they've been budgeted. Now, at the end of the year, fiscal year, if it's not all been used, it rolls back into internal accounts. What we're trying to do is to reduce some of those budget lines to help us, again, close the gap here in terms of balancing the budget or eliminate a few others. And we'll talk about those shortly in detail. But we hope to be able to then, especially in some areas, reestablish greater funding as income starts to build up again, as our internal accounts start to build up again. Okay. Anything else?
Ellen?
Thanks. This is somewhat related to what Rachel was asking about with the underutilized line items. And you mentioned, Dr. Powers, you mentioned department budgets. And so I was wondering how the 30% cut number was arrived at. Did you look at data from the past couple of years and just kind of see like, oh, across the board departments are coming in at like 70% of what they're allotted? Like, I guess I was wondering how that decision was made.
Yeah, we basically did it, and Jeremy can chime in here if he wishes to, but we basically did the 30% because it gave us the additional funds we needed to fill a particular gap. It was just that much additional that we needed. We also eliminated a few other line item areas completely. And again, as I mentioned, if we are able to restore some of our internal accounts, we'll be able to, on an as-needed basis as we go along during the year, try to restore some of those funds to the department budgets.
So can we move to the budget document? Because I think we're talking about the numbers in that document,
Yes.
but aren't based on anything. So I think maybe Troy could pull that up. That would be helpful.
You can go ahead with that now.
And are there more detailed numbers than just those 2 pages?
Not really, because I mean, we have more detailed numbers, but they're all going to be actualized or activated by the decisions we make over the next few days. In other words, especially with regard to how we are able to change the funding for one of the positions, for example, if we're able to do that as part of our budgeting, which we have a specific figures for that. And we do have a few other areas where we have figures to match that up. But for example, in the case of the savings by new hires, that's kind of a moving figure. It's not a set piece yet because we have not hired anyone yet for those positions. We know what salary people had who are leaving, but we have to then determine what the difference is going to be for the people who are coming in. So we've started several pieces here that still need to. Right now, we do have a budget that will actually work and that will balance. But there's some things, especially with regard to the student enrollment and whether or not we receive the additional funding for SBB because of our shortfall. Those still remain to be seen, and we hope to have all those questions answered in the next, well, hopefully through this week and the beginning of next week.
I think Roberto had a question, but I think he just, if you're back, Roberto, do you want to ask your question?
I do, and I don't know if it's at this time that I can ask my question or if we're going to go into more detail about the budget. But my question for Dr. Powers and Mr. Voigt is, what is the total amount that we received from the stimulus package, the additional fund? I know you gave a percentage, but I believe it's, well, yes. What is the amount, the exact amount that we received? And the second question is, there is over $1 million in the internal accounts, and I want to know how the school is maximizing those funds.
Absolutely. I can tell you that I wish I had that one figure in front of me that you were asking about, Mr. Mendes.
I have it. So if it's $125 per,
Right.
it's $264,000 approximately.
$264,000 in the one area, and then the OST, which is the out of school time, that's over $100,000, about $150,000. And that's going to be devoted to both a combination of summer programming and after school programming to support students in the coming school year. And then the first amount, the $250,000, a portion of that will go toward a person who will then set up and operate the programming that we'll have using the rest of the funds for various services and expenses. But since I will have to say this in all honesty, we just received guidance on the OST portion, the smaller of the two portions, and we have not yet received guidance on the ADF, other than the fact that we can use it for a personnel position.
Okay, Dr. Powers, thank you. That is helpful for me. So a total of additional funds that the school received just for this upcoming school year. We don't know if they're going to continue to provide those additional funds. So we have $264,000 and $150,000 for out of school time. So these are after school programs or summer programs that is supposed to address some of the learning loss due to the pandemic. Is that correct?
Learning loss and social emotional issues as well. And again,
then the
we're
200.
still awaiting detailed guidance.
Okay, and you don't have any guidance on the $264,000 aside
Other
from
than
it
the fact
could
that
be used.
Some of it for personnel.
Okay, so I raised that because one of the demands, I think that one of the, to address a lot of the social, emotional, and cultural issues that have been ongoing is to either dedicate, that's the correct word, to dedicate a position, a restorative justice coordinator or a school culture that would be their sole responsibilities, to be an advocate for the students, to address a lot of these things. And I bring this up because Dr. Powers, I think you mentioned this has been coming up, and I know that the administrative leadership team has a lot of priorities, a lot of competing demands, and a lot of times there's just not enough time, not enough resource, not enough space. And so having a dedicated position that would address these things from the classroom, from as soon as they walk into the school, walking through the hallways, in the classroom, and just interaction with everyone. I think that would be an important position. Is your thinking that we could use that $264,000 for that type of position, or are you thinking that that $264,000 is really just to address the learning loss?
That's going to be, those are very good points, Mr. Menjivar. The $250,000 and the OST funds, it's $160,000. That's focusing on the coming year, essentially. What you're asking about is some other type of position, whether it be a dean, a restorative justice coordinator, and so forth. We're looking how that can be funded through the whole school safety and security committee, the work that committee is going to be doing. Because with the SRO program currently in abeyance, we would be receiving funds if we did not continue with one or both SROs for the school. And the funds that we have coming from that would be ongoing funds, meaning it wouldn't just be for next year, it would be an ongoing allocation to the school. That's where we're hoping to be able to, and again, I don't want to speak for the committee because they're just getting their work started and we'll be reporting before the next LSC meeting, hopefully. There may be a little bit of delay, but I'm not sure exactly where CPS is on all the steps in it. But that should provide us with the means to address that, and that does fit directly under the idea of health and safety for students. So we will have additional funding available to us through that, but we want that committee to actually do the planning on what that position might look like.
So thank you. And just to follow up on that, my concern, I guess, is this whole safety committee. This depends on the LSC voting to not retain one or both to get those funds. So if this LSC votes to retain both, then we lose out on that. So I would like to have a contingency plan in this budget that earmarks that like a position. Mm-hmm. And if this LSC votes to not retain the SROs and we get those funds, then we can address that line item. So I don't know if that is, well, one, is that possible? And then the next question that I have on that same line, it's my understanding that Jones did have a dean maybe a few years ago, a dean of students, and I'm wondering what happened to that position, or why didn't the school just put someone else in that position?
Well, to answer your first question first, we cannot put a position in the budget where we don't have some type of projected or real funding for it. So I understand what you are saying. If the LSC votes to retain one or both of the SROs, and again, it's going to be up to the committee to present a plan that comes to the LSC for final decision on that, final approval or modification. Then from that point forward, we'll be able to plan on how we would be able to fund the type of position you're talking about. But I don't think, I mean, we can have that essentially on the table, you know, for possible planning for the future, depending on how the funding of this issue goes forward. But we cannot actually put it in the budget because we don't have an ability to fund it at this time. If we get, for example, let's say, for example, we get a partial from that. Part of it is LSC decides to keep one SRO and not the other. Then we receive part of the money, and then we go forward with planning based on that. Now, with regard to our Dean of Students, we did have a Dean of Students when I first came. That person handled discipline, basically, and a few other things. And when that person left us, we opted to, because we were a growing school and expanding program, we opted to turn that into our second assistant principal position. So the duties of the Dean of Students had been doing, this is why we don't have a Dean of Students, our assistant principals handle the typical duties of Dean of Students. Most schools, a Dean of Students is someone who handles all the discipline related issues.
I see. Thank you for that historical information. And I recognize, I think you would agree that the assistant principal positions their priorities and responsibilities have grown
tremendously.
Yeah. So thank you.
Yes. Thank you.
Sarah, do you want to go?
Yes, this is from the form. So this is, and then this is only one question on the form, but the question is regarding the person, it says, what expertise does the person who is going to be covered by the additional pandemic funds have on SEL? How does it fit into the current work on SEL in the school culture? So I think the question is just, does the person you have in mind have the qualifications?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, can we go ahead and get started on
I have a question. I just wanted to respond to Roberto's comment about the SRO vote. If we don't know how much CPS is going to give us for those funds, and not only are they contingent on us voting down to remove SROs, it's contingent on an unknown amount of money. I'm really not comfortable thinking that it's a commitment on the part of CPS whatsoever to cover something that could be sufficient. So I really have a lot of questions about saying that we can just push off deciding that we want to fund something because we think that some dollars might be available. That's a lot of contingencies because I haven't seen any dollar figure besides what SROs make from CPS. So have you received that, Dr. Powers, like from Jadine Chow or someone else in central office?
We have received a word that it's approximately $50,000 per position. That's what we've been told. So we'd be looking at, if we did not retain any school resource officers, we'd be looking at approximately $100,000.
And has there really been a promise that that would be multi-year funding?
That has been my understanding. That's the best I can say at this point. Compared to, that's what's come from the Safety and Security Department. And compared to the other funds that we're talking about, which are just for the coming year or maybe a little beyond that, this one is intended to be a replacement. If it is used as part of the safety and security of the school, it's intended to replace the funds that went toward school resource officers.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, would you like us to get started and just kind of go down the spreadsheet?
Yeah, Troy, can you zoom in on?
Okay, we're going to start with the top section there, which is essentially the funds that we receive from CPS. And as you can see, and again, Jeremy, please feel free to walk us through this as well. As you can see, we have a significant shortfall there. The funds themselves are outstripped based on our current staffing levels. If we were to not be able to fund those in any other way, we'd be talking about eliminating probably 3 positions of one sort or another. But again, we have plans for how we can cover that, at least in the short term, potentially if we also receive additional allocation from CPS, because we did fall short that way. Jeremy, would you like to add anything?
Just that, that number started at about negative 365, I think, and we've been able to bring it down to negative 260 by getting creative and figuring out, like Dr. Powers was saying, some teachers are retiring or leaving, and so we know that potentially the new people coming into those positions will probably be at a different salary, so we have changed that to be a little more accurate for what it will look like for next year. And then I think it was already mentioned, Dr. Powers, we do have an appeal in with CPS showing that negative balance to ask them to assist with it, essentially.
Right. That is correct. We do not yet have a timeline on when we're supposed to hear about that, but obviously we need to know before the budget can be finalized, because that will make a major difference. I don't anticipate it would cover the entire gap, but if it covers basically the shortfall from things we were covering previously through 115 funds, then we'll be in a much better position if that's possible. You notice in the next section and the following sections, it's basically internal accounts. We're showing basically zero income. So anything that we do receive starting in the fall, if we are able to open up again for rentals and leases, will be income that is not reflected in this current plan. It has been as high as how much, guys?
About at one, I think the last year was a full year. It was close to $500,000, about 500,000.
Yeah,
in rental income.
That's a pretty significant income for us, and that actually then we pay for. We build into that the costs for the additional staffing and so forth, like having an engineer on site and things like that as well. But again, that's right now we're not planning on any income because we don't know what's going to be happening. Going down into the next section, these are some of the line item areas where we've made changes. There were two line items, administration and principal events, which were kind of contingency funds to use for a number of different events or activities. We've zeroed those out, and we'll try to make do with not having that. We'll see what comes up. For one thing, the last year plus, some of those events have never taken place. It's essentially designed to support other things that are already going on that we should be able to fund. Then we went down and we reduced staff development, not because we think staff development is less important, but because we have not spent all the money we typically have budgeted for staff development. We have typically been able to provide all of our teachers with, if they want to participate, go to a conference or something like that, whether it's online the last year or so, or whether it was in person, we've been able to cover the cost of registration fees pretty much across the board. Admissions is another area where our costs are probably a good deal lower than they were previously. Most of our costs are in that area have been printing, and we've got a pretty good stock of printed material because we have not had the in-person recruitment this past year. We did a virtual recruitment. Hopefully in the fall, we'll see a return to some of our regular recruitment. Our SAT prep has remained the same. We are not showing a budget for ESP, that's support positions listed there because those were positions that we drew upon for outside events. So we don't have
for overtime for those positions.
For overtime for those people. So until the outside rentals come back into play, we will not need to have anything covered in that particular area. We have an assistant principal position, an operations manager position, and a half-time teaching position. These have all been this past year covered in from internal accounts, from the 124 accounts. That has been fairly common, I'd say, for at least, Jeremy, the last 5-6 years. We've covered at least 1, 2, or 3 positions from internal accounts. Is that about accurate?
Yes, I would say for some time now, we've always had a few positions coming from internal accounts. Part of the reason is some of those positions are helping to build those internal accounts. So.
That's right. Yeah, especially the operations manager position. And again, the overtime and sub budget we've zeroed out. That again goes back to the the needs for people during the course of outside events and so forth. Again, that may come back to us as we get income again.
There were a couple hands raised. I don't know if you want to go have them ask questions now or go over the whole document first.
You want to just finish this section and ask any questions based on that?
Yeah, I think finish this section and then Roberto and Rachel will ask.
Okay. Well, we finished that section. Jeremy, do you have anything to mention here?
No, those 3 positions that we were talking about, you can see the numbers did not change from FY21 to FY22. That's what CPS gives us. They will get adjusted when the next year begins. So that's what that notation means.
Mm-hmm.
No, I mean, I think everything else was said already.
Okay.
Okay. Roberto, do you want to go with your question?
I do. Thank you. So Dr. Powers, I'm trying to understand the AP position, the operations manager position for now. Are those funds from CPS, or are those funds that we're putting in from the internal accounts? Because, and then my next question, is that for one AP, one operations manager? Because we have 3 APs, and then my understanding is we have 2 operation managers. So how are we funding 3 APs and 2 operation managers? Where is that on this budget?
I can respond if you like. So the other positions, Troy, if you could scroll up, are CPS funded positions. CPS gives us the ability to kind of fund these positions how we want to. The reason there's 1 AP, 1 operations manager, and a half teacher funded from internal accounts is that's just kind of where the chips fell. If you can keep going up, Troy, all the way to the top. So there on the CPS funded budgets, those different funds, it does say total personnel expenses 165 employee salaries. Within those salaries, that's all of our teachers, support staff, all kinds of people, but there are 2 APs in there and 1 operations manager. The 3rd AP and the 2nd operations manager is what's being covered under the internal accounts section, which was a little lower.
I see. Thank you, Mr. Boyd. If I understand you correctly, then CPS then, are you saying, let me ask you this way, are you saying that CPS requires to have 2 APs, 1 operation, I know the principals require, but 2 APs, 1 operation manager, and that's why there's this $12,524 allocation?
No, there's no requirement for the number of assistant principals. In the past, CPS had done it on a quota basis. If you reached a certain enrollment, you got 1 assistant principal. If you got another level, you got 2 assistant principals. But they did away with that when they created the student-based budget. So everything that comes to us in the student-based budget is considered discretionary, and we determine how it is to be spent. But of course, because we have all those positions existing, the funds are all encumbered when they come to us. So anything we want to do beyond that, we need to be able to fund it in some other way, and that's where internal accounts have been possible. And I want to reiterate something that Jeremy said a few moments ago. Our 1 operations manager position, that is Troy, he's the person who generates the income from the leases and rentals and so forth. So his position essentially pays for itself plus a good deal more, and then also that income from those sources pays for these other positions. But again, we've lost that income in the short term. We still have internal funds available to cover for the coming year, but we need to regenerate that income.
Okay, so my understanding that 2nd operation manager is that where we're coming from the internal account, the $143,000. I don't remember what the amount was. 134,000.
Yeah.
So that's okay. Then Okay. And Dr. Powers, I think you mentioned at the budget committee, I took a view of that video, that you're planning to close 6 positions, either because they're moving, retiring, or resigning. Is that an affirmative? So the last 3 numbers are 412 position, 412, 110, 002, 679, 743, 739. Those are the 6 positions that I think you mentioned. Those are being closed, correct?
They're only being closed until they're refilled again. In other words, they're closed. They're going to be closed because the people who are currently in them are going to be leaving. However, we are going to staff other people in those positions. The only exception being we had an English position that may only need to be staffed at 0.5 or possibly not at all.
Yeah, if I could just chime in, or sorry, depending on what you're seeing, I'm not sure which, where that information is coming from. It may appear as though a position has been closed, but the way CPS budgeting works is you have to close out one position if you want to reopen something in a different lane and step based on, we know this teacher who has a doctorate is leaving, this new teacher coming in probably won't have those same lane step credentials. So we have to close out the former teacher and reopen a new position. So it might look like things are getting closed, but there's a new position being open to replace that.
I see. And that, I guess, you're accounting like this, the funds that are in that budget, the 12.5 million, is accounting for potentially filling those 6 positions with slightly less experienced staff.
And that's what I was saying at the beginning, where we started with about a negative 365 deficit with CPS funds. Now we've brought it down to about negative 260 by doing those adjustments.
I see. And then the $260,000. So my understanding, Mr. Voigt, this has been very educational for me. There is, I believe, slightly over $1 million in the May case accounts. There's slightly over $1 million. So what are we doing with, is that $1 million being spent somewhere here, or are we still holding on to that $1 million? And if portions of those $1 million are being spent, like where are they being spent?
So the $1 million is essentially the school's entire bank account. It is also including different funds that are in clubs, organizations, money that we really can't touch. It's their money. It's just housed within our internal accounts. We did recently, it was presented at the budget committee meeting, and I don't know if we're going to go over it at this meeting tonight as well, but there is a certain amount of surplus funds in that $1 million, which is our bank account, that I would identify as money that's available to use if we need to in a dire situation. But that's, let's call it 600,000. I think it's around that amount. That is not part of this budget that we're presenting to you tonight. Tonight, we're trying to present to you everything that we intend to bring in the coming year and everything that we'll need to pay for in the coming year, and show you that they can balance out without touching that $600,000. We have that as sort of a cushion, but obviously we don't want to deplete everything we have in our internal accounts to try and make it through the next year. So it's being presented and shown to the LSC, but I would not say it is not part of this budget.
Okay, thank you it does. That is very helpful. So then I guess my concern here is, I think according to the May 2021 chart of accounts, we received over $266,000 in activity fees. These are families and students paying, right? The $400 or $450 fee, right? Is that correct?
We didn't receive it like in May per se. That's what was left in activity. The activity fees, they're obviously something we take in each year. And so that account over the years has grown and grown, or like this last year, it's probably depleted more than it's grown. But that's the result of the account over, many, many years. It's not just what you saw in May. Usually,
sure, I apologize. I should be a little more clear with my question. How much money did we receive this year in student fees or activity fees, and how much money did we receive last year?
So I would have to find, I have some documents showing that, I think. Sarah had asked me for something a few years back. Every month we present the chart of accounts, and there is a comparison column to the month before that. I could look at the two, chart of accounts from the beginning of the fiscal year to the end of the fiscal year, and we could get that difference. But I don't have it readily available for you.
Sure. So, Mr. Voigt, so everybody understands where I'm going with this, right? We can anticipate that we'll receive a certain percentage of the same funds that we received last year from student activity fees. I understand the rental, that's up in the air. So if we have $600,000, which, I get, you don't want to deplete all $600,000, but I'm looking at like a 30% cut across the board. And we have $600,000. We're going to anticipate that we're going to receive, let's say, $150,000 from student fees or general school fees. We're now at $750,000, and we're cutting instead of expanding, right, opportunities.
So again, we wanted to present a balanced budget to the LSC. If the LSC deems that they don't want to make these cuts and they would prefer to dip into that 600,000 surplus, it's not my decision, but I'm certainly willing to entertain that. Is that correct, Dr. Powers? Is that how you would phrase it?
Yes. Well? And also, and Mr. Menjivar, what you've come up with takes us into that second page of the budget. So we may want to look at that as we're continuing with our conversation. There at the top is our internal account student fees projection.
And sorry, just to interrupt Dr. Powers, Mr. Menjivar, I think you are asking what we actually received in those fees. These are estimates of what we could receive, but it's all based on it, like assuming every student pays their fees in the year that they are actually assessed. Many students, it can be carried over from year to year. So just to put that out there as well, these are estimates.
And of course, the percentage of our students who qualify for fee waivers also is a factor.
And just to put it into perspective, the document that Jeremy shared with me showed, and it's true, it shows more than just, it shows fees that are paid, I don't know, late or later than expected, potentially. It was $384,000 was collected between July 1st of 2020 and March 25th of 2021. So that was kind of a to date, just to give you a number. So I'm not sure if you ever get to 520.
Well, just to sort of a disclaimer on that is, I think a lot of people do not or did not realize fees were on their account just because they weren't in school this year. We didn't have the same amount of communication that we would normally have to collect these fees in this year because of the pandemic.
So you're saying that this is probably a lower than average number.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
And a lot of fees are probably going to start. I mean, seniors, for example, are all paying fees right now.
Okay, Cassie, your hand's up. And Ellen.
No, I just wanted to mark my place. I can hold my question, but it is really, I don't understand why we just have a 30% decrease across the board if these departments have differing usage over past years about the amount they've used. So it seems like a uniform thing is just a convenience thing to make the budget balance, and it's not really based in what we should budget. And I would like to see some information. Not if you don't have it tonight, that makes sense. But in order to approve a budget, I want to know what the departments have to cover. Do they cover their textbooks? Do they cover their tech? Do they cover software? Do they cover, I know science will cover like actual objects that they're using for experiments. But so it would be nice to, do they cover their copies? Like we have this fee that covers copies. Like, but do departments pay for that? So I need some details in those things so that I can understand where those numbers come from. And the historical numbers are helpful because then we can see how much do these departments pay typically and how much they cover. But we need to actually know where that is being spent on, or it was not very helpful.
Well, what we've done here is basically just to reach a certain figure. In other words, so that we have a balance. We can certainly go into each budget and look at what the trend has been toward the carryover, I guess you might say, not carryover, but going back into internal accounts. In other words, how much utilization was there, whether it's 100% or less than 100%. And there are a lot of things purchased through departments. If a department is unable to purchase something or doesn't have the full amount, we typically will use whatever is available in the department account and then go on to additional funds as we have those available, such as a large textbook purchase.
Yes,
if I
that's the kind of thing that we want to know in order to approve the budget. We need that information. So that is the kind of thing that we'd like to see. I think it's clear that we're going to have a second special meeting for the budget. And so I really need to see that if I'm going to be able to vote on this budget.
So if I could add to what Dr. Powers is saying, and maybe if we scroll down a little bit, you could also see some of the other outstanding costs, but most of what you listed, Ms. Cresswell, is not stuff that is expected of the departments, like their licensing. You can see down toward the bottom, even a little more, Troy. We have Math Excel, we have Peer Deck, we have Nearpod, we have Screencastify, Adhesive. Those are all programs that are built in within this budget, meaning the school is expecting to pay for those, not those various department accounts. Textbooks have never been an expectation within those department accounts. They're not identified on here because I'll be honest, we don't really have numbers right now. I mean, we're just getting quotes from teachers right now on textbooks for next year. I'll try and put some ballparks together for you, but it's hard to predict what we're going to need for textbooks at this moment. And what were the copying price, any paper and copying stuff like that, that's all covered by the school, and it's itemized in their activity for general school fee, which is why it's not a responsibility of the departments either. So
you don't have to
it's
provide
really their own.
Mr. Boyd,
Go
you
ahead.
don't have to provide all this right now, but I just want to make it very clear that we want that sort of breakdown in order to know what the budget is going to for fiscal year 22. So what are estimated software costs and what are our estimated?
And that's on there.
That's on here, yeah.
But so I want to know what those department numbers go to, so I can understand like what are departments expected to cover. So, you know, if just some detail on that, because otherwise those are just very mysterious. And so, like, for example, we bought a computer out of the orchestra budget this year, which there was a lot of questions about. So that's the kind of thing, like, are some of these going to go to computers? We need to know that, which is partly why we've been asking for a tech plan that has details about what we're spending on tech and what we plan to spend on tech, because we need to know those numbers, because that's what a budget is. And so that's the kind of information that we are hoping to have for these things.
Okay.
So also, professional development, are we really cutting that much professional development, or is some of that coming out of the department budgets? That would be good to know too.
Okay, I mean, those are two separate questions. Regarding the computer, that computer in question would not be a part of the school's tech plan. That was something that Ms. Bassa decided she wanted and decided to pay for through her department funds. So that is their discretionary funds. They get to do, with LSC's approval if needed, what they want to do with those funds. We don't really scrutinize those purchases for them. So, I mean,
I'm saying we want to scrutinize purchases in the sense that we want to know how much of our budget is going to go to computers, and how do we decide which teacher is getting new computers. And I think Joanne was trying to cover that a bit in the narrative of the tech plan that we got, but that's the sort of information we want to see, like how much of our budget is going to go to tech, and can we cover any of that, you know, like, will we be able to cover all of it very easily under our reserves, and what we expect to come into internal accounts this year?
So there's also a line item there for technology too.
Yeah, so we just, I feel like we need quite a bit more detail. I think Sarah laid out to Ms. Trosch the kind of detail she would like to see for the tech plan. And I think that is the kind of, you know, we need a tech plan. We just need to see more detail.
Okay. And I've seen the tech plan, so I know there's something in the works.
Yeah, so I just want to make clear that something like a 2-page thing like this is not going to be sufficient for us to vote on the budget, from my opinion. Just
Can I ask, just in terms of, you know, we went from talking about the department budgets and the 30% across the board that we were looking for a reduction there, to a number of other areas. again, each department, that's discretionary funds. In other words, the departments don't build a budget. It's not zero-based budgeting. They don't say, okay, this year we're going to need these 5 things or these 10 things and prioritize how much they're going to cost. Instead, they start off with an amount, and then they utilize those funds as they see fit as part of the discretionary use that they have. We can certainly go back and look at, and each department is going to be making significantly different sorts of purchases. Some are in a position where they maybe more recently completed, let's say a major textbook acquisition or something, or some other kind of thing that they needed. But again, it tends to be more the annual year-to-year sort of things. And based on our experience, a lot of the departments have not expended all of their funds, and those roll back into internal accounts. Now, we can try to go back and look at how that averages out over a period of several years, but to itemize each department is not possible because it's up to the department to determine how those funds are allocated. And if a department needs additional funds for specific needs, then we try to provide that and add that to their budget if at all possible.
That's very helpful. But yeah, you can classify your spending by department, but you can also classify your spending by what you're spending it on. So it'd be great to know, like, historically, what has been spent on computers, what has been spent on textbooks. Those are helpful numbers. And I just still don't have a sense of what, it just seems very weird to give departments these little mini slush funds and tell them they can spend on whatever they want, but maybe it'll be a textbook and maybe it won't, and maybe they'll run out of money and maybe they won't, and then we'll cover it somewhere else. That doesn't really have a budget feel to me. So that's what I'm concerned.
Well, it's pretty classic baseline budgeting. You start with the amount you had the year before. And if that is considered to be appropriate for the needs of that department, and again, they vary tremendously based on amounts of equipment, consumables, that type of thing. It does vary considerably. Some of the departments really don't need a great deal from one year to the next. Others have a much larger financial footprint as far as the costliness of it. So to then redo the budget entirely from the point of view of so much for books, so much for this, so much for that, doesn't set us up for how each department then has funds to work from. Do you understand what I'm saying or follow what I'm saying there? Again, our goal has always been to provide the departments with the funds that they need so they can make discretionary decisions over the needs of their department. And some of that might be new instructional materials of various kinds. Some of it's consumable materials. Some of it is software or something specific for their department, that type of thing.
Thanks for trying to clarify that. I think, Ellen, do you want to take the next question? And let me just say, Elaine, can you put your hand up and I'll call on you to put your questions verbally, just because we were having problems with the chat being translated and stuff. So sort of the substantive stuff, please raise your hand to say so it comes out spoken. Ellen, go ahead.
Yeah, for sure. So I do have some questions about the second page, but I was kind of still looking at the first page. And I had a quick question because I know in your summary, Dr. Powers, you're talking about some line items that were removed because of not being fully utilized.
Right.
So I see like on that list, administration and principal events, I don't know what those like codes mean. So could you like kind of elaborate a little bit on what those had been used for in the past? Is this something that is like just this coming fiscal year that we're not anticipating the need for, or like it's just we're changing into a digital world and we don't need various things?
There's a lot of things like that, Ellen, with regard to just doing things differently than we've been doing in the past with regard to the costs. And again, certain things just aren't, we don't need certain things anymore like we used to. Our printing costs are still pretty significant, but for example, some of the administration and principal events costs were designed to support the recruitment and admissions process. That has so streamlined in recent years and is so much online that we just don't have as great a need anymore. So I've eliminated those as underutilized areas. And that way, at least and that was the case of those two lines, there's $20,000 that we don't have to budget for. because we can get by without whatever we would have purchased within that.
I had one quick follow-up question. I apologize for sneaking in another question, because I also saw the admissions number dropped. And so I know that one conversation that's been kind of ongoing is making sure we're reaching out to schools throughout the city of Chicago to make them aware of Jones as a community and like see if they have questions about what the Jones culture is like. So the admissions line item, does that include attending? I don't know. Like, do they charge a fee to go to like admissions fairs?
No.
Okay, so what does that?
That's all sweat equity. That's all people going out and doing those things. About the only significant cost involved, for example, we don't get any mileage or anything for doing any of that, or any kind of comp time or anything. The only real cost tends to be printing. And as I mentioned, we have a pretty significant stock of printed materials that are still, up to date for purposes. So, and also I do not anticipate that every school is going to go back to an in-person high school fair. I suspect that some of them will continue with some type of virtual event. We've gotten no real indication so far, except from a few schools who have said, yes, we're probably going to stay virtual with this. It's easier for everybody and it costs nothing.
Thank you for clarifying. So it sounds like it's an ongoing expectation.
Certainly.
Roberto, do you want to go next? We'll do a recess in like 10 minutes. So we'll see what questions we get through before then.
I do have several questions here. So just doing a rough calculation of the various activities on the 2022 budget for the 30% discount, it's about $238,000, right? That we're going to be, basically we're saving, right? That's the term we're using, right? Yes. Saving $238,000. Does that sound about right?
Jeremy, does that sound reasonable?
You're saying the gains based on last year, or where are you getting the numbers, Mr. Menivar?
So looking at the estimates, right, that's $238,000. Looking at the F2022 is $238,000 that we're going to be spending on these activities versus what we spent yesterday, or not yesterday, I'm sorry, 2021.
I'm not following. 238,000.
Yes, so that's
basically
the total.
You're okay.
So we're saving. What is the savings? Right, we're saving about.
Based compared to last year with the
That's correct. That's
and
correct.
The changes?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So there's two groups that we're looking at for that. The one, where are we right now? Troy, if you could scroll up a little more there, a little more. So that 138, nope, too far. That 138, 188, that's the gain from FY21 to FY22. You can see the 487, 778 was our negative last year for that group. This year, that negative is 349, or the projection is 349, 590. That's assuming there's no rentals. So because we've made some cuts and things, that's a gain of 138 there. And
yes,
then down
I'm sorry, I misspoke. 138. That's my apologies.
Okay,
So,
and then if you can scroll down, Troy, all the way to the end of the next page, same deal. There's a little bit of a gain there, and then up a little further up, I think there was, a gain in the fees because the FRM is down. That's our free and reduced students. That number percentage has gone down. The enrollment has gone up based on the previous fiscal year. So there's a gain in fees, and then the cuts have brought us to the 11,385 gain at the bottom.
okay, that's helpful. So then going to Cassie's question about the tech plan. for some reason, I feel, and Sarah, correct me if I'm wrong, or maybe anyone on this meeting, I think there's like an average of $150,000 that Ms. Trosh is kind of thinking about in replacing a lot of the computers. And I think I saw something about the computer science asking for additional computers, but I'm not sure if that's correct. And if it is correct, if there's an average of $150,000, why can't we use the internal accounts to cover those $150,000? The $150,000, that's an average, because I think it's more than $150,000. And the reason I ask this is because my understanding is that all purchase orders, all spending deadline is May 21st. So if we need to spend, we need to spend by May 21st to meet the school's needs for the upcoming school year.
The deadline of May 21st is for CPS funds, which are almost all utilized at our school in personnel. All internal accounts, they may be put on a budget line. Internal accounts can be moved to a budget line, and we purchase computers with those internal account funds. If they're not utilized at the end of that deadline, they do roll over to next year. So we don't lose those funds. The only funds we would lose are the 115 funds, and all of our 115 funds, with the exception of, a small amount each year, are all utilized in personnel.
Okay, thank you. So regarding the tech plan, Mr. Voigt, you mentioned there's a line item here, and I think you're referring to IT, the IT department. Is that
Nope, down at the bottom of the page, which is where some of the newer
IT technology spending?
Correct. The one-to-one technology spending, that would be the Chromebook purchases that we're looking to make sure we have one-to-one for all the students in the upcoming year. We got to that 88,000 amount because she did give us a number for what we would still need for Chromebooks after, incorporating all the ones that were donated by CPS. We took away from it the surplus that's currently in our Eagle Leader freshman fee account, because we are doing away with that fee, and it seems appropriate that those funds should go to the next incoming class in their one-to-one devices.
I see. So that's my concern, is we're taking fees away from activities, but we're sitting on $600,000, right? And I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that the computer science department mentioned that they want to move from PCs to MacBooks, right? We purchased an iMac for a single teacher. So now let's purchase those MacBooks for the computer science program. And I just don't understand why we're going to nickel and dime families when we're sitting on $600,000. So my next question is, my understanding that $600,000 is went for a rainy day, right? What would a rainy day be for the school? That I would like to know that.
I wouldn't call it a rainy day surplus. From my perspective, I call it more like a cushion. So when July 1 rolls around, we don't have any fees collected yet from families. But we do need to start building our budgets for all these different departments and all these programs that we need to have in place for day one on September, 7th. So if we don't have any of that cushion to do that with, and parents aren't going to start paying fees until October, November, possibly May, then we don't have anything to work with. So it's that's what that cushion is. And I'm not saying we need $600,000 for that cushion, but we do need something, and to deplete it altogether would put us in a very dire situation.
And I agree with you, Mr. Voigt. We shouldn't deplete it down to zero, but $600,000 seems excessive, especially, we're still living in a pandemic. Families are suffering through financial hardship, social, emotional. There's been a lot going on. And I think one of the points in the CWIP is maximizing school resources. So I'm just trying to figure out there's eight, for example, the technology, we're projecting 88,000. We could cover that today, right?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, let's take a short recess of like 4 minutes, and then you can keep your hands up and we'll cover Sarah's questions. I can either read Elaine's questions or Elaine can cover them, and what Rachel has as well. So see you guys at 8:04. Actually, that's too many minutes, but 8:04. Okay, I would like to call everyone back to order. And
Let's maybe wait till we get a couple more cameras on and then I'll do a roll call.
Okay, thanks.
And just an FYI, when it is my turn, I'm going to ask a lot of questions from the form that we put out, so we can keep it brief. But let's wait till we see Dr. Powers turn his camera on. Okay, let me do a roll call vote. It's 8:05. I'm going to do roll call. Bowman.
Present.
Boyd.
Here.
Bugs.
Present.
Cerna Prado.
Here.
Cresswell.
Here.
Okay. Hilbrands.
Here.
Ma here. Martinsek.
Here.
MacArthur.
Here.
Menjivar.
Present.
Powers.
Here.
Zen.
Here.
All right, that's 12. All right. Back to questions.
Actually, before we do the form questions, let's do Elaine's questions. So one of the questions is, have you considered adding a college and career counselor to support students?
That is a very good question. We investigated that a few years ago. What we've done instead is invested in counselors who are the college career counselors as well as their personal counselors. The college career counselor role tends to be more focused on, especially in schools that need to have a single person who can really just focus on that, where they do not have the guidance services of the quality and the scope of what we have. So no, we have not added that position. We'd rather have the 6 counselors rather than a college and career specialist.
Thank you for your response. Dr. Powers, I'd like to ask that you all reconsider that just based on some of the data and information that's coming in terms of supporting all students, because people they have different needs, and there have been some gaps identified there. So that was the reason why I posed that question. And I do know that there are some schools, some highly selective private schools, that still do have like the college counselors, because it can help with some of the things in addition to a counselor. So if you can reconsider it, I'd certainly appreciate it. Thank you.
Elaine, do you want to do your other questions? I mean, I'm happy to read them too, but the next one is there a textbook renewal schedule? So sort of like a tech plan, but for textbooks. Is there something like that?
Within each department, they determine whether or not the textbook that they're currently using needs to be replaced or not. They've been acquired over many different years and at different amounts. For example, we purchase textbooks every year, but often they are simply supplemental numbers of the existing text. So we leave that up to the department to determine if they feel like they need a new text, and then they make the argument for it, and then they get the quotes for it, and we move from there. There's not actually a replacement schedule for it per se, because some textbooks last and are valid much longer than others.
Yeah, I think probably Elaine's point is that going forward, it would be helpful to have sort of like this is what we expect is gonna, happen in the next 12 months. It looks like with the AP Human Geography text, that has been a known thing for a couple of years that it was gonna need to be replaced. So, even knowing instances like that, like here's the list of things that are probably going to need to be done in the next couple of years, I think is what she is talking about. The next question is, what about the $85 million from CPS that can be used towards technology support? And is that being distributed to schools to spend, I think is the question.
I'm not familiar with that particular figure. We did receive a large number of Chromebooks, over 1,100. We received a lot of instructional classroom-related technology in the form of speakers and cameras and so forth. I'm not sure about this $85 million that's being referenced.
Dr. Powers, on this is my last question. So I was referencing emails that have gone out from CPS in regards to, I think it's a quite sizable amount that they're receiving overall, additional funding, and some has been allocated for equity, but then the $85 million, they mentioned that can go to support technology as it relates to pandemic and social emotional learning. I know that they said something's going to be coming out. I posed that question just because I know I believe at the budget meeting, it mentioned something about a $100 technology fee for students. So I was wondering if it might be able to support or offset that, given these times and impact that it might be on families. And if that could just be something you all can use to cover that or support some of the things you're wanting to do with technology. So that was what that was.
Well, as soon as we find out more about that, that'll certainly be a factor in our budgeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Sarah, do you want to do?
I think Rachel should go before I get into the form, and then we'll just slog through. These are good questions, so.
Go ahead, Rachel.
So I guess my question, I have two questions, but my first question kind of relates to Elaine's question about textbooks, just because I was thinking, just something that Cassie said made me think, is it possible to, I guess, get an average of how much departments use or how much of their discretionary funds go unused? Like maybe, I know that it changes year by year, but just like a 5-year idea of like, which departments are using like funds and which ones have like leftover. And then because we're talking about textbook replacement and how that's kind of tied into departments knowing which textbooks are going to expire. I just feel like that would just be useful for me because I don't want to I don't want to make an uninformed decision. But and then the second question that I had was just the very last budget line, which is I think it's the last one on the second page, which is the translation line. So I just wonder, because $5,000 for a whole school year, I mean, translation is expensive, especially it's like, even if it's like $100 per hour, that's 50 hours. And I just wonder, I'm just wondering, or maybe we can collaborate on like that number, just because I know that this budget is like, being calculated very closely, but that's just that I don't know how reasonable or like realistic that is. So those are my two questions.
Okay. I want to refer to Troy on that, because I know he communicated with our case manager, and I think this is primarily intended for interpreter services for face-to-face meetings and parent conferences. Troy, correct me if I'm wrong on that. Or was this also handling translation of documents, which I know there's a lot of online capabilities there?
It's a mixture of a little bit of both.
Okay.
I would kind of argue that in the previous year, it says NA for translation. I don't know if that's necessarily true. My understanding is that there was a budget for that. And Kim Rebecca, who's our case manager, would use those funds to get translation services for any families that had IEPs or 504 meetings. And that would also go into if a family needed translation during the parent-teacher conference, it would be pulled from that as well.
Yeah, if I could just dovetail on that too. The NA is just sort of, because it's a new line item this year, we've separated it from the other stuff. In previous years, there's always been translation services for IEPs, especially. And I did converse with Ms. Rebecca about what they anticipate, especially for the upcoming year, because there will be more. And she gave me a figure, we went through it together, of about $1,000. The other 4,000 was our best guess at how much we'll need to do translation on the other communication areas. And I'll be honest, I don't know exactly what all is anticipated to be in translation, but that's the number we came up with by consulting with the people who are probably going to be working on it in the upcoming year. If it needs to be changed or amended, we can certainly look at that.
I just wonder because, for example, like email communications or communications about very particular like events, for example, and I think that Daniel was speaking to this and during his public comment, relying on like Google Translate for those sorts of communications is just not like, as someone with a parent who speaks another language, like those translations are not actually that good most of the time, and they kind of like give the bare minimum. But especially if it's like a sensitive topic, I just wonder about like that's gonna need like a human being behind at the keyboard typing like an actual response. So I just wonder how like that's fitting into that budget item.
At this point, again, we don't know exactly what kind of costs we're going to incur in something like that. We have created the line. I mean, we can boost the amount in there, but that's just strictly a guesstimate on what that would be. And also, we don't know whether we'd be utilizing internal resources or external resources for translation services.
So Dr. Powers, can I just interrupt there? That is something that we expect the budget to have. We understand it's an estimate, and we understand we haven't done this before in a thorough way, and that's why parents and students have been unhappy. Machine translation is not sufficient. Okay. I think that's been made very clear. I would think that we would need something like, a clerk whose half time could be dedicated mostly to translating needs or something like that. And we would, definitely have, say an additional bilingual clerk position, and that person's part of their duties would be covered by making sure that the materials that we have, like the student handbook, like these emergency emails that go out, that our standard newsletters that go out, are actually translated and to have that available. There are other schools that are doing this. There are other schools that have more bilingual clerks. I think there's ways to find out these numbers, and that's the numbers that we'd like to see in order to approve the budget. And so, I think we have some room in the budget since we have a $600,000 cushion that doesn't appear on this sheet. But we want some more robust detail. Is that something you can provide for us by May 20th?
Well, I think we can come up with a figure. The question is whether that will be sufficient and exactly how we'll deliver the services. That's what we're going to have to determine.
That is what you're determining. Yeah. I think I'm not quite making myself clear. Like, yes, the idea is that you figure out the resources and how much they'll cost. And that's really what the idea is of making a budget for the coming year.
Okay, I understand that, but we're talking about a situation now where we're talking about hiring an additional bilingual clerk when we may be laying off somebody who is not a teacher.
Well, those are the trade-offs that we're supposed to be understanding as an LSC. Mm-hmm. So that's why it's going to be very helpful when we have a list of positions and not just a lump sum of the 115 funds. So that is also something that we absolutely need to have some detail on.
When you say a list of positions, you want to see everyone's salaries and.
Those are public information. These are public dollars. Yes.
Is that what you're asking for?
Yes. Yes. We want to see
and then
how much positions cost, and we need to see that.
Okay, but then where do we go from there in terms of the use of that information?
We go from there to decide, are these the positions that are covering what we want the school to achieve in the coming year? And that's supposed to actually be driven by the CIWP. I would like to see some of that. I think Sarah actually asked that in an email. Could we see where the decisions and trade-offs that we're making, how those match up with the CIWP? One of our priorities is MTSS. How would that work? So that's what we are hoping to see. And I'm sorry if you're unhappy with my tone, Mr. Boyd, but this is a really basic part of LSC budgeting, and it's very surprising that this is not a basic part of the LSC budgeting at Jones, apparently.
Well, with all due respect, Ms. Cresswell, I've been doing this job
and I need Sarah to cover these questions that she has. So let's go on to Sarah's questions.
Okay. So you get to talk, but nobody else does.
Let's hear what Mr. Boyd has to say.
My only point was going to be that we've been doing this for a long time. I've been working at this school longer than some of the students have been alive who go to the school here. And this is the first year that I'm getting so much backlash about the way we prepare our budgets. So That speaks for itself, I believe.
In my 12 previous years as principal, that has not been an issue. If we've been able to cover the needs of our students and the professionals in the school, the educators in the school, the administration and the faculty and staff have been allowed to make the decision in terms of what is needed based on enrollment, based on student demand and so forth, then that has passed through the LSC without undue scrutiny, I guess you might say, beyond this. At this point, you mentioned earlier, Ms. Cresswell, that a 2-page budget is not sufficient. What do you want?
I think we've been covering that. I think Sarah will cover that in more detail. Sarah, why don't you go ahead and ask the questions that are from the chat? And I think before the end of this meeting, we will make it very clear the information that we need in order to pass the budget by May 20th. So Sarah, go ahead and ask the questions that have come in.
Okay, there's not, it's a lot of questions, but it's not that many. And I think that we can answer them all efficiently. If people said who they were, I'll say who they are, and I'll also read their questions. And if we could try to just keep the answers succinct. Some people have multi-part questions, so I just want to be respectful of answering their questions. Our first set of questions is from Katie Colby. She's a choir director. She offered her information. Her first question is what specific line items are looking at cuts, and I think it might have been answered by now, but it was. It looked like it was the budgets by the departmental budgets by 30%. And just as a clarification to everyone watching is that was to present to the LC a balanced budget, right? It's not okay. So her second question is, the performing arts have had generous budget allocations beyond the fees. If performing arts funding is cut, where will the funding of new music, like for essentially their textbooks, instrument maintenance, uniforms, et cetera, come from? So I think she's just nervous that a 30% cut, she won't be able to fund her materials. I don't know if you have an answer.
Only that we will start receiving additional funds both through fees and through income from rentals as we enter into the new school year.
Okay.
And what I'm hoping we will be able to do is over the course of the next school year, we'll be able to supplement the budgets that we're presenting here for the departments. This was done essentially in an equitable manner based on a percentage across the board, just as a starting point. We realize it's not desirable, but at the same time, we have to close the budget gap.
Okay.
I would just add, in speaking to what Rachel said, I'm happy to put together some numbers for previous years to show what departments have and haven't spent. I would caution that, in my opinion, if you start saying, hey, science department, you get your whole budget back, but math department, we're cutting yours by 50% because you didn't spend enough, we're going to just have backlash in a different way. So, that could be your way of justifying cutting those budgets. To me, it seems more equitable to cut all of the budgets the same amount percentage-wise.
All right, I have a separate, after all these questions, I have my own questions, which I think will help address that. This is another question. What funding is being allocated for changing, creating, repairing the staff culture at Jones? Improved staff culture will drastically alter student outcomes if teachers are united. A parent mentioned funding for sports to improve school spirit, but what student or teacher wants to give school spirit when it's clear the emotional and functional? I think it got cut off. Is there PD or is there something funding being allocated for staff culture?
We certainly are expending a significant amount of money with the anti-racism training through Davis Squared. That comes under professional development, and it is a cultural related expenditure, and that is not in our budget. That was a donation from Friends of Jones. So that's one example of something that we are doing. We do try to do things to, improve the environment, among faculty members, such as the things we did last week with regard to Teacher Appreciation Week. We, funded a luncheon. We did a number of different things, some raffles and so forth that we did. that FOJ was able to provide us with support for. So yes, we're trying to do some things like that. Mr. Hilbrand's organized some evening events, some trivia contests, and so forth that were open to the whole Jones family. So there are ways in which I think we are trying to enhance the interaction with people. I think it's exacerbated by the fact that so many people have been remote for so long. I think once people are more fully back in the building, interacting with their colleagues in their department and interacting with each other across departmental lines, I think we'll see a little bit more positive environment coming our way.
Okay. She wanted to note that there was an error noted about the vocal music budget line of only 106 students. Currently, there's 136. I didn't see that level of detail, but
I don't know.
okay. No, she's just saying that it's 136 students. Can either Nearpod or Pear Deck be eliminated? It's redundant to have both. There are many resources listed at the bottom that are assumed for renewal. And then it gets cut off. It says, what opportunities I think will stakeholders have to chime in about software, I think.
Well, NearDeck or Pear Deck and Nearpod were purchased at the request of faculty, and we provided the licensing for that. Different teachers or different departments found different ones more useful than others for one reason or another. Again, it's a little bit beyond my skill set simply because I'm not involved with using those. So we're keeping those in there as a way in which to provide that resource. Now, if it turns out that it's not needed, we'll be more than happy to quit funding it.
Yeah, I think she was just looking for a way or a conduit for how to be able to communicate that information.
Is this from a teacher or?
This is still from Katie Colby.
Okay, well.
So potentially maybe a system that y'all.
The last I heard was that some teachers use one and some teachers use another. None of those lines are put on there without us consulting with the teachers first and saying, is someone still using this? We've also entertained the idea of, putting out a form out there to say, these are all the different licensings we're currently paying for or expecting to pay for. We want to see what kind of usage they're getting. So can you please let us know which ones you're using and kind of go from there. So, we put it on the budget as of now because we might need to plan accordingly, but there could be some that will get cut, yes.
Okay. Her last question is, what is included in the athletics line? Is that funding for all non-curricular athletics? Is there a separate allocation for PE curricular classes? Did I miss a delineation in these two very drastically different things?
There's a physical education budget, separate. It's a department budget. And the athletics budget strictly pertains to interscholastic sports.
Can you, Mr. Boyd, can you just remind us of those numbers?
So for next year, including the decrease, the PE budget stands at $3,500. The athletics stands at $52,500.
Okay. Okay. We're gonna move on to our next question, which is anonymous. Dr. Powers says he wants to close 2 positions. What are those 2 positions specifically?
No, I don't want to close 2 positions.
Okay.
We are possibly reducing 1 vacant teaching position if it is not needed, either reducing it to half or closing it if it is not needed based on the enrollment for that department. And the other one is a non-teaching position, a main office function position that we'll be closing if we have a retirement, if there's an attrition, or we possibly might have to close a position otherwise. But it's premature to mention specifically what those positions are.
Okay, because I was just going to ask, what is the 1 vacant position? Okay, too premature.
Yeah.
I think people are nervous.
Yeah.
That's why they're asking that question. Right. You're going to have to share eventually.
Of course.
Okay. Okay.
But I can tell you this: CPS does not allow us to inform an employee if their position is being closed. Okay. They are informed when CPS sends out their letter that the position has been closed. That's how the procedures we are required to follow.
Okay, yeah, that will lead to a bucket question later. Okay, will departments have to cover department-specific software for their budgets as we move to one-to-one?
I do not know, truthfully. I do not know. Right now,
Department.
Yeah.
Go ahead, sir.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Jeremy.
I mean, if they mean by department-specific softwares like Math Excel is one of those that I would classify as a department-specific software, that line item is on here. We try to accommodate and help out with those where we can, and that's sort of how this is ballooned in the last couple of years, especially with remote learning. You see all those licenses now that we're looking at purchasing for the upcoming year. Again, it's not something that we can easily predict because the teachers find in mid-year that they really need a program, and you know, they may fund it through their department if they can handle it. If they can't, then we try and help out to make sure that they get what they need.
Okay. I think it would be good to be consistent. So I know things have changed and evolved. What is the procedure for staff professional development funding? As a teacher, I have no idea there was the opportunity to have PD paid for by the school. And I feel uncomfortable with such a large cut to the fund since probably few teachers knew that there was an option to request for PD to be paid in this way.
I'm not sure why somebody doesn't know that. I hate to say that. I'm smiling about it. We've made that clear all the time. If somebody there's a conference they want to attend or some other type of thing like that, we will do everything we can to support their registration fees. We've always had that policy in place. It's just that we have not had to use all the funds that we have budgeted in the past. So for those kinds of things, we definitely do support registration fees especially. We're not in a position to cover transportation and so forth, but fortunately here in Chicago, a lot is here and a lot now more is virtual as well.
Okay. I don't know if that's something PPLC could communicate. You're like, I don't know who's supposed to communicate.
We'll try to communicate that more clearly to everyone.
Okay. Why do we need 3 APs in the school? What are their specific roles that make them all needed?
Well, for one thing, we have to provide teacher evaluation on the REACH system, which is a contracted systems, part of the CTU contract, for over 100 teachers. There are many observations, many conferences needed, things need to be written up, and it's extremely time consuming. Now, this year, that hasn't been the case because the REACH evaluations were put on the shelf by mutual agreement between CPS and CTU. However, once we resume, we can spend, if we do everything with fidelity, we can spend easily a third to a half of our time as each administrator observing, conferencing, and writing evaluations and summative, both formative and summative evaluations. As the school has grown, having 3 assistant principals and myself, we take equal loads and divide up the departments, we would find ourselves basically tied up with evaluations more than half of the time. And the rest of the time would be very hard pressed to do everything that we're required to do. That is why a school of our size right now is absolutely on par with our peer schools in terms of the number of assistant principals we have. Lane is twice the size, they have twice as many, and they have deans.
That it's true about the APs because I looked at that data. My question is then, it says what, besides the evaluations, what are the specific roles? So for example, each,
We provide the teachers with a spreadsheet of who is responsible for all the major functions in the school. They can look it up in terms of the spreadsheet. It's there. It's on the Google Drive. We go over it. Maybe this year we didn't go over it as carefully because everything was kind of, are we starting? Aren't we starting? You know, how we're doing that. We were kind of scrambling to do everything. But that information has been provided for years. And we do everything we can to provide it in more detail.
That might be a question not from a teacher. So is that document available to us as the LSC?
I think we shared with you
They
the
did, yeah.
descriptions of each individual administrator. Yes.
I think, yes,
this year?
we have the spreadsheet and we had the individual Google Docs. At least we have the Google Docs. I'm not sure if we have a spreadsheet from this year.
I can provide the spreadsheet if you wish.
But here's my,
Drew
maybe
all that information from the spreadsheet.
a comment would be to, on the website, potentially put like a very high level overview of, in their bio of what they're doing. I think.
We will do that.
Okay.
We'll do that.
Okay. If Jones is having, again, a lower percentage of low income students, and if the majority of recruitment outreach is being done online, does that indicate that there continues to be limited or lower recruitment in lower income and or higher BIPOC student schools? Are there efforts being made to reach out to students in 6th grade before their 7th grade end of year grades are locked in and potentially locking them out of admission opportunities? Is a budget line item needed to increase the sweat hours of reading out to those student schools? So I read the whole question, even though it seemed like multiple parts, because it is kind of a global question.
We do. We reach out to any school that invites us, that we are able to get to them. And we sometimes, as members of the administrative team, we sometimes will do 2 or 3 school visits in a single day. And this is all crammed in between the end of September and early November. So a period of about 6 weeks or thereabouts. And we're frequently out of the building. Obviously, we have to make sure there's coverage here at the building. With individual, with groups of schools, sometimes 2, 3, 4, 5 schools work together for their high school fair, or it could be a network level. And also this includes public and non-public. We cover probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 to 150 elementary schools every single year in person. And that's one member or the other of our administrative team. And we make sure we cover all areas of the city. Now, if a school is not doing one, we have all of our online resources, the website, other things, and we'll certainly continue to do things that will help them. And of course, we have the open house, which we weren't able to have in 2020, but typically that brings in almost 5,000 visitors in one day. And it really draws people from all over the city. So these are things, obviously the open house has some costs related to it. Friends of Jones has done a great deal to help us with that in terms of supporting us, but we definitely reach out across the city. I go to a number of schools where we've never had a student qualify to get into Jones, but we carry the message nevertheless. And we meet with the kids and we meet with families.
Did you attend any of you mentioned that they are going online. Did you attend any last year during the pandemic?
Yes, we did. There weren't very many. There were a few network level ones, and we were able to participate in some of those, and a few individual schools or small groupings of schools. Many schools did not actually do a high school fair. I suspect this fall we'll get a combination of in-person and online virtual events, and we will participate in as many as we possibly can.
And because I was taking some notes, I just had a question. Did you say that you and the APs go? Do counselors go?
No, they don't.
I guess I'm just wondering is
school administration.
Okay.
And I was the first CPS principal to do so. Absolutely the first.
Okay.
And I've done it every year.
The next question is when the school is moving to a 1-to-1 Chromebook model, why is the tech coordinator's position being cut from 12 months to 10 months?
It isn't being cut. That's no decision has been just made on something like that.
Okay.
That is just one piece of a major puzzle we're trying to put together. No decision has been made as yet.
Okay. I remember a recent LC meeting where we heard that there was a financial need that was covered by the reserve fund. And the school leaders seem very happy that the reserve existed. Wouldn't that be a good reason to keep a healthy reserve fund now? I think that's talking about covering positions from the Friends of Jones rainy. I don't know if it was rainy day or
the gap.
I don't remember what it was. Bridge the gap.
Yeah.
Okay. It seems that there is a rift in the idea that the school is moving towards an awareness of DEI, diverse, equity, inclusion issues, and SEL needs of students, and yet still looking to hire another SRO. I don't. How do you balance both of these seemingly contradictory ideas? What internal data justifies this need? One, we don't hire SROs; those were provided by the city. And then 2, they've decided not to return them this year. And then 3, there is a safety committee. Dr. Powers, it has a name, right? Safety.
The whole school safety and security committee, yeah. And
Whole
that's a system-wide process that we're working through.
So I don't know who wrote the comment, but there is this school-wide committee is supposed to be meeting and then putting the recommendations, bring to the LC in June to vote. June, when is that meeting scheduled?
Mr. Mitchell, I think, is Mr. Mitchell on?
Yes, I am on. Rachel sent me an email yesterday. I haven't had a chance to get back to it. I will send it to her and Daniel, who are anticipated to be on the committee. And my hope is that we will meet either late this week or early next week.
And how many meetings do you think you'll have to have before?
It'll depend after our first meeting. I mean,
Okay.
Yeah, that's going to be an ongoing, thing. We know we have a timetable to take care of some business. And so a lot of things have already been kind of put out there in the air. We just need to kind of pull them together and make a decision, make our plan.
Does CPS give you a rubric or some kind of template to use, or it's just?
There is a template. I all that will be brought to the meeting. That I think you're kind of getting to the nuts and bolts of the actual.
Yeah,
meeting.
no, I was just curious how much you had to do on your own and how much they're going to help you with that.
Yeah, no, there is a template. There's a timetable, a time frame, some suggested tools to help with the process.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mitchell. Okay, our next question is, how do school fees compare to those at other CPS high schools? I put together a whole list of not all the schools, obviously, but of selective enrollment high schools and specifically, and we're pretty much average. I can publish that list in the public folder so people can look at that. People in different schools might say things differently. They might have a freshman fee or a senior fee, and we have more of a general fee, but everyone has the specialized AP fees and other fees. Okay, this is the next question. How do the number of clerks that we have compare to the number at other CPS high schools? Specifically in terms of number of students per clerk at Jones versus number of students per clerk at other CPS schools. I know we are a larger school than some other schools, so we may need to have more clerks due to that. So looking for a comparative analysis of clerks. I feel like I have that.
I think we're pretty much on par. And our clerks are very specialized. I mean, we have, not very specialized, but we have, for example, a school assistant functioning essentially as a clerk for the counseling department. There's, 6-7 people working in that area. So there's need for support there to organize and also provide language services in this particular case. We have a bilingual clerk in the main office. We have a clerk who basically handles reception, but also handles all the substitute teachers and all of that every single day. We have a clerk devoted basically entirely to attendance. And then we have one clerk who handles a myriad of different duties plus registrar duties. So if we were to eliminate any one of those, all those duties would have to be reallocated to other people. And
yeah, and I can actually answer that question. I have found this data. We have 4 clerks, which I think you just talked about. Is that what you? And we have 490 students per clerk, whereas like Peyton has 2 clerks, so they have 600 students per clerk. Whitney's has 6 clerks, so they have 365 per clerk. But like, for example, Whitney doesn't have a void, so we have a void, and so I think that's something to keep in mind.
If I could add to that,
yes,
there are a lot of clerical duties at our school that might be picked up by the 2 operations managers, for example. The IT coordinator has a huge task with textbooks that she handles. We have 2 IT coordinators, and then as Dr. Powers said, we have a school assistant who basically functions as a clerk. So what we see on paper isn't always what's translated into our actual day-to-day duties.
We also do not have a principal's clerk as such. In other words, the administrators all basically handle almost all their own clerical duties.
Okay, and the last question before my questions. Has there ever been a time when a teacher did not get what they need? Sounds like a loaded question. I don't know if I want to put that out to the teachers.
I'm sure there has been.
Yeah.
I'm sure there has been, but what somebody feels like they need or what, may not fit with the resources we have available. We try to be very flexible and very supportive of our teachers. Someone comes to us and says, we need to do this, or we want to have that. We have generally been able to support them in one way or another.
Okay. Looking for my questions. Okay, so I just had like some general takeaways, which was I think that when we're talking about this 30% cut, and I think it makes people nervous, is that for context was to present a balanced budget this evening. I feel like we're splitting hairs over $100,000. I think that the compromise would be to just put the budgets back how they were, with the commitment that Voight and I will go back and look at the historical data, which we've already talked about, even as late, as late as today, this afternoon. I was asking him how I could see that, and we talked about going back to the chart of accounts and seeing what the actuals were. But then I think also with the commitment that we just have to plan, and this meeting feels like a school that finally, for the first time, is feeling a financial pinch, and that the school never has had this feeling. The budgets that I've worked on before are so much tighter than this, and this budget meeting is acting like we don't have money, but we still have more money. We still have plenty of money, and we still have more money than I don't want to name a school, but a public high school down the street from me, which I know people that work at, and they would kill to have this money. So I also think that we need to, as an LSE, and we talked about saying what we would want, but definitely more money for translation, whether that's adding a position. And this is where my question was, and this is why it makes me nervous. So I have in my notes that by Friday, Dr. Powers needs to put forth all the positions and buckets that he wants. That is from that budget document that CPS sent to you with the total number of, does that sound familiar, that date?
It does. Jeremy, you had some follow-up on that today.
Yeah, so this is pertaining specifically to positions that are paid for from our internal accounts. And in this case, that would be those three we keep referring to: AP, operations manager, and a half teacher. Internal accounts people are saying, we need to know what your plan is for those three positions by this Friday. I did email that person again today and said, we need to get approval from our LSC before we can commit to that. Is Friday, a strong, solid date? And she said they could probably give us till Monday. Not much more time. So I don't know where that leaves us. The positions can always be closed if that's what the LSC decides, and then we will retain those funds as soon as it's closed. Meaning she'll plan to have it open. I mean, I shouldn't say the money will basically just roll over eventually if we close it. It's not a good idea. It would be better to know those three positions are either are or are not going to be paid from the 124 funds.
Yep.
Right, because that means you have to give CPS the money.
Yeah, eventually
so
she's going to bill us for the full
so
position.
it's definitely something we want to know. And when it says positions and buckets, what does that mean, buckets?
The buckets, I don't want to focus on them too much. They're pretty inconsequential. They're basically placeholders to get a bucket started, and then we fill that bucket throughout the year as funds are needed. And those buckets are for overtime, for teachers, for support staff, for whatever those needs might be. But to actually start them, I think they're starting with like $1,000 each. So they're really not a lot of funds in those buckets. It's just getting it started so that basically in the summer, when we have teachers and staff here doing all the different summer programs, we have a bucket in place already.
Yeah. I'm going to get back to that of trying to within the next 10, 15 minutes so we can say this is what we're looking for. And I think that everyone who's sitting here right now needs to think of how is our budget student-centered? How does it support our 4 CIWP goals? And how can we move forward and ask for the information that we desire to plan to approve the budget? As a whole separate issue, think about the processes that need to be put in place so that you would be way more comfortable doing this next year. So what needs to happen? Do we need to put a process in place for software, textbooks? Obviously, the tech plan was very rough. It was very basic. It needs work. And then my email today said, I want to know what the deltas are, right? What are the changes? So, and I know that you said everything's preliminary, but if on May 20th we're voting on a budget that's cutting positions, I need to know that before the date, like before I'm in the meeting, like so that we can really see that how are the students impacted, right? Student-centered budget. How are the students impacted? Did we raise our class sizes? How are the teachers' days affected? Is their workload increased and how? And then as a school decide, like, what are the department budgets for and what are they not for? If moving forward, yeah, before they paid for some tech and they paid for some licenses, but if it's for the students, then maybe the licenses has to be taken out of that because it doesn't make sense that, I don't know what makes sense, without having enough data. So I don't know how to move forward necessarily, but I would like us to be able to do a few more things this evening, which is equity report and then voting on the $2,500 stuff if possible. So what steps can we do, or Cassie, I don't, or other council members if they have something.
Can I ask this? I'm hearing a willingness, in fact, a desire to utilize a portion of the internal accounts that we currently have available to us in order to not do some of the reductions that we were looking at here in order to balance this particular budget. Am I correct in saying that?
That was what I said. I wouldn't want to make that assumption for everyone else.
Okay. Is that a feeling among the LSC members? That I know Mr. Mukhtar spoke to that, and do we wish to then draw upon some of that, not all of it, but some of that, with the anticipation that we'll start to be able to receive additional funding during the course of the coming year. And of course, we still have the appeal process out there for the 115 funds that came up short. Because that would be what we could do here if that is something that is the sense of the LSC.
I'm sorry, I got distracted by something in the chat, but.
I think there
May I
is.
respond? Or I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, yes, I think we should be using more of that 600,000. I don't know what a normal amount is to carry over each year, but there's just, we need more information to know what makes sense to actually have cash on hand in August to not run into difficulties. That said, the details that Sarah was asking for, those are crucial to knowing, like, we don't want to just spend more money. We want to know what we're spending more money on. So that is a really important part of that. So yes, I think if it means that you wouldn't have to say do this 30% decrease across the board or something, that would be beneficial, but we still really want some more details on what we're spending on. And if we are saying that we can't afford a college and career counselor, if we can't afford a restorative justice coordinator, we just need more information, because I think we want to actually explore some of those as options. And I think it's extremely clear that $5,000 is not for the translation needs. So that certainly is something that's going to have to, that should be looked at, and it should be considered, how could a position role be shifted to cover some of that.
And if I may follow, so Dr. Powers, I do appreciate that, the way you just framed it. And Mr. Voigt, I understand, this is a challenging conversation, but I want you to understand, from my perspective, we're sitting on $600,000. And I'm trying to understand what would be a good cushion. I'm not saying let's deplete the funds, but we're cutting 30%. Are there things can we use the internal account to absorb some of that? And just to follow up, to put concrete things that I would like to see is following up on Councilmember Buggs' comment about the college counselor. I'm looking at the line item here for the SAT prep. It's $3,200, and it has not changed in 3 years. So in 2019, I think you allocated for the ACT $3,200, 2020, $3,200, 2022, $3,200, and then the Friends of Jones just recently announced that they're going to offer SAT prep for 15 students. I think they starting 15 students.
Right.
That's less than 10%, and I think that's less than 5% of the junior class, right? Assuming the junior class is 475 students, right? That's not enough. We know that over 30% of our students are coming from low-income households. So I want to see that standardized test prep boosted to 25,000 to 50,000. The average cost is about $500 to $1,000 per pupil. So I want to see a significant increase in that SAT test prep, because the data has shown that our students of color are not performing as comparative to their white counterparts. And so we need to address that. The other thing is that we know that the EOS, and I believe the students today mentioned regarding the disparities between the students of taking AP classes and the reason they avoid those certain classes. So we need to support them, right? We need to support the students of color who, and at a school that's already excelling, there are real areas of growth to help our Black, Brown, Latinx, our Asian students narrow that gap. So I would like to see a significant fund increase in that. Now, the last point I want to make is the translation. I believe we mentioned that there was a two-step translation part. One was a technological solution, which I really appreciate that this LSC pushed, and I appreciate the administration acting on that. The second part was human translation. I think council member from the Equity Committee, Deborah Land, mentioned that you can certify certain staff to make sure that they could actually be able to translate documents. So if we're unwilling to create a position, or we think that translation services is too expensive, we can explore how do we certify our bilingual clerks, right, that are already in the school so that they could translate documents. So we can look, I'm trying to figure out solutions here, right? So that's an option. So that's where I'm coming from. And then my last question, I have one question, is what is the difference between the operations manager and the clerks in their, and like their roles and responsibilities and the pay, right? Is there a significant difference between the pay between clerks and operations manager?
There are, because the clerks basically work a 39-week calendar, and the operations manager, which are Jeremy as the business manager and Troy as our director of development, work 12-month contracts. And so there's a significant difference there in terms of scope of responsibility, and also in terms of their calendar as well. I wanted to add something, Mr. Menjivar, following up on that particular SAT prep line. That is an internal prep program that we offer to the students, basically free of charge. And we do that in the early, well, the late winter before SAT time comes. We previously did an English and a math section, but our English results have always been very strong and there was greater interest in math. So we do a math SAT prep. It's open to all juniors, regardless of whether they can pay or not. We do ask for those who are not on fee waivers to pay $25 for it, and it's a 6-week program. And if they then complete the attendance and everything else, they get a partial rebate from that. Students who are on fee waivers do not pay anything. And I think we had, and Jeremy, you may know this, we had well over 100 juniors this last winter, if I'm not mistaken, take it. And normally over 100.
I don't know off the top of my head, but it is, as you're saying, it's elective. I mean, it is based on what the student, the student has to sign up. So I'm not saying more money couldn't be put into that program, but at some point it is the students wanting to do it as well.
And it's Jones teachers who do the teaching. They do it after school and on Saturday mornings.
I appreciate that, Dr. Powers. I didn't realize that, that this is teacher-led after school. So I guess what I would like this LSC and the administration, as we're working out the budget, is trying to find external partners, because the teachers are overtaxed, right? And I think these standardized assessments, they're hopefully going to be going away or not have a significant impact on college enrollment or part of their application, but we need to address it. So I would like the school to consider significantly increasing, looking for external partners for SAT prep, PSAT, SMQT. And the last thing is that counselors and teachers, at least one counselor and one teacher, when I've asked them about the SAT prep, they've said, it's up to Dr. Powers. I don't know what that means, but it seems like, it's not, yeah, it just, I don't know what that means. So I want to make it clear that there is a budget, a significant line item to support all of our students, and in particular, our students of color and historically students who have been marginalized and left out of the college application process.
Thank you.
Thanks, Roberto. Maybe that is something that out of school time money can be directed to, if it's like an after school thing as well, and we're increasing that. That is definitely something I would think might be an option for that.
Yep.
Next, Dr. Powers, do you have a question for us or yourself?
I just want to make sure I understand where we're moving forward. We want to look toward, I will say, you had asked the question earlier, how can we do this differently next year? Okay, I think Sarah asked that. I would like to go to a zero-based budget for the department budgets. In my previous schools, we've always done that. Have the departments, starting earlier in the spring, tell us what you need, prioritize it, give us the figures, et cetera, and then build the budget from there. Now, inevitably, I've never had a zero-based budget where everything came in within the resources we had available. That's why prioritizing is important. We have stuck with a baseline budget for a long time because that's essentially what CPS schools mostly do. If a department had 10,000 the year before, they get 10,000 again, or they get 10,500 or something like that. I would like to start building this from the ground up. It does mean more work on the part of the individual departments, especially in terms of identifying costs and also prioritizing those costs. But I would like to do that for the following year's budget to avoid the kind of discussion we've had to have this evening. I don't think we would have had this issue had we not had to find a way to balance the budget here. If we had just stuck with the numbers we currently had, I don't know that we would have necessarily had as much of a conversation about this, especially if it meets the needs of the individual departments. But I do want to retain a level of flexibility for our teachers, because to say, okay, this is what you're approved to do, and don't do anything else. You said you wanted to buy this. Well, buy it. Needs change during the course of the year. Things come up, other things maybe supersede. So I still want to give our teachers and our departments flexibility in how they utilize their funds. But we can come up with a better way to build that from the ground up, but we can't do it right now. We're not in a position to do it for the next fiscal year. That will have to follow in the future. And we'll start earlier with that.
Thanks. I think if there's some component that we would like to see done, if possible, for this year, it's really like as much of the tech plan as possible, because that's such a big new
We're trying to
change.
do that, yeah.
So yeah, and even with the software, since that's a
Mm-hmm.
component as well, and that's like a big.
The challenge we're facing right now, and I think Jeremy, Troy, anybody who's working in the school right now, we are slammed. I mean, we're working. I'm usually here 5:30 in the morning, and of course, I'm still here now. And of course, I'm especially so since I had to miss, so many weeks due to illness, and I worked as much as I could remotely during that time. But all of us are really slammed. We had to do the reopening. We had to absorb a whole different approach to hybrid learning all of a sudden over a very quick period of time. CPS provided us with technology that had to be integrated into the classrooms, and we purchased additional technology beyond that. So right now, our technology plan is for the shorter term. It's for the coming year, essentially. And then as we move forward with the expansion of our one-to-one capabilities, then we will be able to build upon that for future years. But that's just the tech plan. That's true with everything else we're doing right now.
Okay. I think Troy has had his hand up for a while. Troy, do you want to go?
Mr. Mitchell, I think, as well.
Oh, okay. We'll cover Troy's question.
So just two things that I really want to convey. I get the sense that a lot of people are nervous that rentals are not going to be coming back. That is far from the truth. I'm talking with a lot of the churches. They are eager to come in. And now with an announcement that Pfizer is going to be available to youths, my guess is we'll probably be back in the building by the end of summer. There's movies, there's large corporations like Nike that have expressed interest in doing some work outside in our track. That's revenue that's going to be coming in. These are things that are starting to come back to the full capacity. What Dr. Power said, yes, that is true. We probably won't feel the full capacity until probably 2022. So that is coming back, and everyone that has done rentals before has the full intention of coming back, probably more than they've ever been before. And even if a church doesn't come back, I get contacted probably every week for a church to come in. So, and then I also wanted to address the translation thing. And these are conversations that I've had with Atlas, which is our translator service for the 504s. There is a certain tier that it kind of goes. So depending on the complexity of the document, it impacts the turnaround time and the cost. And I know that we've been focusing more on Spanish, but there's also the Chinese languages. And I think we can do a better job of identifying some of these families that, right now we currently ask, what's your preferred language? Do you need a translator? And those are just options that CPS has put in Aspen, our database. So that's what I follow, because we really don't have any additional place to put this information other than just referring back to this document. So for next year, the plan I think is to go into a little bit more detail, try to ask more questions of how families want to receive information. But that is really going to kind of rely on what they respond. And then we can go from there as far as sending out communications. And the difficulty that I have is there's so much that goes out. I don't know where is that limit Do you include the teachers' emails, the emails that go out through Aspen? I can control the ones that go out through what I send out, but there's other people that I have no idea what they're sending. And so I don't know where does that fall, and if a family does come to us and ask us to translate it, definitely we can do that. But someone mentioned too, like having a position, if it's just Spanish, what about our Chinese families or
We have to
Polish
make a new
families?
arrangement for that then. Yeah, so I think that those are definitely the kinds of questions that figuring out what the translation position, if there was one, would need, or if it can only be done, if it could be covered by vendors, those are definitely the questions to ask. And, families need this information, whether it's coming from a teacher or the office. So it's what the school is telling them. So it's communications from the school, whether it's, a mass communication or smaller. So that is definitely the stuff that has to be worked out to figure out how close of an estimate we can get in this budget and whether it needs additional staff or whether we could do some other arrangements like that. Dr. Powers, do you have something on either of those topics? Was that a new hand or is that an old hand?
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I can just say I endorse what Troy had to say. I'm glad it looks like our prospects for returning to more use for rentals and so forth looks pretty good, but we still haven't had the green light from CPS yet, and
Yeah.
that's still what we're waiting on.
Ellen, you want to go next?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. So that's actually in response to what Dr. Powers was saying about like the department budgets, like moving towards zero-based budgeting. So I think that is definitely a direction that would be useful for like the overall school budget. And I think also for departments to like kind of figure out their allocations. And I'm speaking completely on my own behalf here. I have not surveyed teachers in the past 5 minutes about this. That being said, I think it also does kind of reinforce the need for clarity about like what exactly departments cover from their budget. I know this year, as we're wrapping up the fiscal year, we were asked to like start with department budgets for textbook needs, recognizing that they will not necessarily cover. So sometimes it is textbooks. I know for science this year, we had various like platforms because we aren't doing in-person labs. And so we have, for example, like this Gizmos like platform that is used for like interaction virtually that's like a lab. And so that may or may not be a need in an ongoing fashion. And then similarly, I think actually one of the things that's on our agenda to look at for today, when we get there, like the over 2,500, I'm sorry, purchases is like, as we're going one-to-one changing out devices, like we need new tech to connect our existing lab supplies. So I guess I would like to like echo that I think zero-based budgeting would be really useful in conjunction with some of that guidance, so that like we know kind of as we're projecting ahead, where are we expected to be spending money versus where is it coming from other places?
Good.
Thanks, Ellen. And then Rachel.
Troy, I just want to say thank you for kind of like thinking through some of those like translation questions. I think that's like a really productive like line of questioning. And I just like I'm thinking about the, this idea of parents coming. I know we keep harping on this, but the idea of like parents coming to the school to ask for things to be translated, I don't think that's actually realistic. And I'm just thinking about like the parents who filled out the one of the survey, the principal evaluation survey. I mean, I don't want to get into details, but there were some comments that said, I wish that communications came to us in our language. And so maybe that those parents aren't sending an email directly to people asking, can you translate this document? Can you translate this? And they're just kind of used to things not being translated. And so I guess if it's a question of, translating things, having someone designated in Spanish, and also having someone like designated for Mandarin, I don't think that's like a bad thing to talk about. Or I just want to say like thank you for like starting that conversation.
Thanks. Yes, so I think we need to figure out how many more meetings we're going to need, and how that timing fits with the buckets and the positions, and how that timing fits with the May 20th deadline as well. I think Rachel had some information in the health and safety about the health and safety because of that safety plan, and there's a student forum coming up, so that may be something we have to talk about yet tonight. And Denia had some questions that are in the student report. The PPLC report also was mostly questions. So looking at all those, we can kind of think what of that we need to cover tonight. I think of even the approving items over $2,500, if the real deadline is on May 20th, unless some of those are like, you know, these reopening urgent ones, we could probably put some of those off as well. Yeah, if PPLC has,
we're good.
Okay, if you have budget questions, those will probably be coming up in these next budget meetings anyway.
Are there any of the 2,500, Jeremy, any of the 2,500 purchases we could go ahead and address tonight? That way he can proceed with the orders and so forth. I don't want to hold anything up if we don't have to.
Sarah, did you have a?
All ready. I got all my motions written. I'm ready to go. I hate to bring up the big word, but fees, are we skipping that?
I we can do that tonight as well. I think that's
Okay, so our takeaway is that I'm going to meet with Mr. Voigt and Dr. Powers, and we'll try to present something, and then we'll figure out some dates in a minute.
Yes.
I mean, like,
I was just going to say, I have a whole list of items that I'm going to try and work on to give you guys more information starting tomorrow. I'm way behind on other things, so I will do my best, but I have them written down.
Sarah, if we could arrange something maybe for Monday or Tuesday, and you know, next week.
it's only Tuesday, maybe. Yeah. Well, let's, Ellen.
Sorry, you had previously mentioned that there's a deadline of this Friday, which Jeremy says maybe could be extended to Monday regarding positions. So I don't think next Monday or Tuesday is going to work.
Well, that's one specific area, though.
For sure, absolutely.
We're not going to get the overall approval of the budget before Tuesday night, Wednesday night, you know.
Yeah, I think the small group, though, if we could meet before the end of this week, that would make me much happier. So we'd have weekend to make sure we answered the questions. And then in a minute, we'll have to get our calendars out and figure out when we want to do those special meetings.
Just an FYI, I'm taking my wife starting tomorrow to the hospital for a series of medical programs or medical appointments and tests. So
Okay.
I'm going to be gone the remainder of the week.
Okay, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
I think, how about Jeremy and I work
Not an
together?
emergency, but I can be I can, you know, get on the phone maybe on Friday if necessary. But Tuesday or Wednesday and Thursday, I'm going to be pretty much tied up all day.
Okay, so Jeremy. Okay, and then Cassie, do you want to set a date for our special meeting?
Yes.
For next week? Or for, wait, I gotta get a calendar.
Yeah, so
I mean, we have to approve Ride or Die, May 20th, which is Thursday.
Yeah.
So
I feel like the 7th, if we could do something the 17th, if we have to have like another session on the 20th to do a final vote or something, then it could happen. And these Mondays have worked out for principal evaluation, so I'm hoping that could work for this. And that would also, you know, we could tell CPS, but we're doing it on the evening of the 17th. I don't know if that's
works for me.
I'm fine for the 17th and a follow-up on the 18th if necessary.
Yeah, yeah, because as you remember, if you adjourn and come back within 24 hours, you don't have to do a lot of extra stuff, so that can be more efficient. So let's plan for the 17th. Will you do an actual budget committee, Sarah, or will you just have a small meeting?
We could do an actual budget. I feel like
I feel like it would be, it depends how many people want to come from the LSC. If it's more than
I would
three,
like to join.
yeah, no, yeah. We'll make it official because then it'll just be documented and
yeah.
yeah.
For that.
So, but let me, Jeremy, Friday? What's your, I know you're busy.
No, I'm sorry. So you're saying this Friday to finalize the deadline for the 124 funds, which they need an answer by for Monday, correct?
That and everything else. I mean, I think like, yeah, obviously the LSC on Monday would meet and finalize the 124. The budget committee, we can only make a recommendation. We can't say that. So,
Okay.
But we're just saying, why don't we have an official budget meeting on Friday, just so it's documented and it's public.
So my only concern then is if the meeting is, you're saying this Monday to approve the 124 positions, that may be too late. Because she's saying they need to know on Monday.
All right, so do we want to approve those
I mean, I
tonight?
could try and
it's not
push
going to
back.
change, or it is going to change.
I mean, if we don't know any of the positions in the 115, I don't see how we're going to know what to approve in the 124. So, but it doesn't sound like we can have that information by Friday either.
Well, I mean, to be frank, we could put whatever isn't funded in those,
Right.
like, it's just moving it around. If we'd feel more comfortable having other
But,
positions.
I
Go
mean,
ahead.
we have position values for everybody in this building, if that's what you're asking for. I'm not saying I'm at liberty to give that. I'm just saying.
We have it, it's public. You can get it off
Yeah.
the website, yeah.
Well, I just want to do one little quick clarification. We're a public body deciding how to spend tax dollars, so that's just public.
Right.
Salaries are public. That's just how it is, and everyone can look that up right now.
Right.
That is part of that.
I think how about that? This is what I would like to see is I don't need the total dollar is the total dollar, right? We get that money. But what are the positions in the which positions are in the 114? So
The
that
124s.
I'm sorry, oh my gosh, the 124s.
It's
Thank
just
you.
those three.
Yeah, and they were listed
I
on
meant-
that budget outline.
Yeah, no, I don't mean those. I meant the ones from the SBB money.
That's everything.
Basically everyone
That's everything
else.
else. Yes,
Yes,
basically everyone.
everything
I
else.
just want to make sure that no one was cut. Like, I just want to see,
No.
like, yeah.
There's no cut positions,
Okay.
at least not yet. At least
Okay.
not yet. And any decisions that are going to be made in that area are going to be made based on our ability to handle the needs of the school. And as I've said before, right now we're not looking at cutting any teaching positions, possibly reducing one vacancy by half because we've done away with a portion of the curriculum that's not needed to be taught anymore. So, I mean, it's a very minor change, and any other savings are going to come through the replacement hiring.
Okay, Ellen?
Sorry, I don't know if this question is like very entry level, and I apologize for that because I'm a little confused about what's happening. So the deadline that Mr. Voigt had mentioned earlier regarding like positions in like 124 and things like that, I think I understand what that is, but Dr. Powers, you're saying right now that those decisions may not be made by Monday. I guess I'm just a little bit confused about what's going on with positions.
Some of it has to do with how many kids we're going to get, and we won't know that until after Friday. And some of it has to do with whether or not our appeal to CPS is successful. And after our conversations this evening, some of it has to do with the use of existing internal accounts funds, 124 funds. So there's several different pieces there. We can go back, for example, and look in terms of our internal accounts that exist and adjust decisions with regard to what we were trying to reduce, such as, for example, the department budgets. We can go back and restore that, for example, see what is needed from internal accounts to do that, and potentially any position we may be considering closing.
Okay, But the position, if there is a position that is closing, that is the thing that Mr. Voigt was saying needs to be figured out by Monday at the very latest.
No.
No.
The
Okay,
only,
that's the
thing for
clarification I
Monday
need.
are these 3 positions, the 1 assistant principal, the 1 operations manager, and the halftime teaching position for orchestra. Those are the only 3. And even if we were to look at the others, all the other 100 plus people that are in 115, it's just a question of moving the dollars back and forth. In other words, we could do 3 different positions here, but it wouldn't change anything in the overall picture. These are just ones where they fit into that particular category. For example, the operations manager is paid for from internal accounts because it's paid for from income from rentals. At least it has been until we get that going again.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the clarification. I definitely was
Sure.
confused on that point, and I am no longer.
That's if you're not confused, I don't know why I'm not. But if we could ascertain that yes, we can renew those positions out of 124, those 3 positions out of 124 funds by the end of this week or Monday at the latest. Given that one of those positions may shift its funding source effective July 1, which would restore those numbers, that amount into the 124 funds. In other words, it wouldn't be necessary. We would simply shift it over for the coming year and then try to see where we go from there the following year. That's kind of why these 3 are still sitting there like that.
And that can happen in the middle of the year if someone retires and they're very expensive, and then you hire someone that's newer and they're not as expensive, you can return that money. Like you don't have to.
Exactly.
Oh, I'm thinking, well, kind of.
Well,
Mr. Boyd's like,
the
well,
whole thing, you're right. The whole thing is very dynamic. In other words, income comes in, changes take place in terms of personnel. People leave, people have to be replaced. Just as here at the end of the school year, we have several positions that need to be replaced, and we're going to replace and have savings because they're higher paid teachers being replaced by newer teachers coming in. So if we could get an agreement on just those 3 positions to come from 124 funds, pending anything we might do differently at July 1 with one of them from the other funds, then Jeremy would be able to proceed with that portion of it that's required by CPS by Friday or again, Monday at the latest.
So the July 1 one's the ADF, is that what you're saying? Or whatever?
Yeah, that's the ADF funds, right.
And can you give us details about what position you're trying to do?
We're at this particular point, the assistant principal position you see listed there would become our person who is going to handle that whole project, and other responsibilities would still retain the assistant principal role because we would still need the person for teacher evaluations, for example. But other duties would then be absorbed into whatever else the other 3 of us are able to do. That way, that person can devote the vast majority of their time to those particular goals of that budget area. And then that would carry us through that next year. And then we see what happens after that in terms of the restoration of our internal accounts.
And that AP is which AP?
That's our newest, Ms. Gonzalez Torres. That's our newest teacher, our newest AP.
Okay, so to give us flexibility, to give everyone a breathing room, we could make a motion to approve those 3 positions to be paid for out of 124 funds. Then separately, Voight, I will gather questions from the council, meet with Voight as a budget committee to hash out the rest of our potential questions and compromises. And then we would meet on Monday to discuss that, which I think will also include the fees. I don't think we're going to have the fee discussion tonight. Right. So, Mr. Menjivar.
I do. I have question regarding the 3 positions. If we don't approve this, what happens? Like, will those positions be closed effectively on Monday, or will those positions, the people in those positions, will they continue to work throughout the year? And then July 1st, if we do get that money, we could say, great, We got the money. We can fill the positions. I'm just trying to figure out, like, if we don't approve this tonight, what happens to those 3 positions?
I can speak to it a little if Dr. Powers is okay with that.
Sure.
So what they want from us is a commitment essentially right now. They aren't physically funding those positions on Friday or Monday or whatever. They want the commitment starting July 1. We intend to pay for those 3 positions from our internal accounts. All 3 of those positions definitely go until June 30th. But if we don't commit to paying for them out of those 1, 2, 4 funds, and we can't fund them out of anywhere else, they will be, they'll be zeroed out basically at the end of the fiscal year. And then on July 1, I guess theoretically, yes, we could get a position, once we receive those funds that we're speaking of, we could theoretically open those 3 positions again if there was enough money for it. I don't know if there would be. And they could be backdated to July 1, so there was no lapse in employment. But those are a lot of ifs, so did I cover that correctly, Dr. Powers? That's my understanding.
Yeah, no, you're right there. I mean, if we were to close them on Monday, people work through the 30th of June, essentially, or they're paid through the 30th of June, through the remainder of their contracts. But then we would have to then reopen them. And I think right now where we are, we have the means to keep those positions open and fund them through 124 funds, especially because we are planning to move the largest of those 3 positions out to a different area of funding after July 1, the ADF funds. And we have received approval that that can be done. So that would be part of our planning for the use of those funds, would be designating an individual to spearhead those efforts.
I see, but it doesn't sound like we would lose those funds, because right now those 3 positions are over, I want to say over $200,000.
That is correct.
Is that right? So it won't get swept out. They'll be able to work through June 30th, July 1st. We can decide whether we need to open up those 3 positions again.
Well, the problem is this: those 3 positions, they're going to continue. They have to continue in one form or another. We're not going to cut our orchestra teacher. We're not going to cut Mr. Hilbrands for what he's doing. And frankly, the role of the assistant principal, as we said, we're basically right on par with other schools in terms of the number of assistant principals. And our assistant principals cover a broader range of responsibilities than in many schools where they have deans and other people, admissions directors and that sort of thing. We absorb all of that within the administrative team. So at this particular point, they're going to end up being funded, and they're going to end up being funded most likely through internal accounts. I mean, I can't, either if we move those to 115, then we have to move something else out of 115 to account for that amount of money. And that's correct, right, Jeremy? I mean, as far as putting it that way. So it really doesn't matter. It's those 3. It could be 3 others. The main reason it's there is largely because we expanded the orchestra program several years ago. We had 1 teacher teaching all instrumental music. We added a halftime orchestra teacher to expand the program, and that's where that particular position ended up, and has been funded that way, I think, from the beginning, 3 years. Is that correct, Jeremy? For the teacher in that? I think so, yeah.
It's always been funded from there as far as I know.
Right. And the operations manager there, that has been funded from internal accounts because it's funded from the work of that particular person. And then we've always, at least in the last, I don't know how many years, we've always had an assistant principal in 115 or in 124 funds until we might have received additional funds from CPS after the 10th day. We didn't have that this year, so the assistant principal position remained in that area, 124.
Also,
I'm sorry, Mr. Voigt. Oh,
go ahead.
no, please.
I was just going to say, as a point of clarification, I think you are asking if those 3 positions could get funded with the, I forget what they're called, ADA funds that we get in July 1. And the answer is no. I think we would get about 260 or 265 from those funds,
Mhm.
and that won't cover those 3 positions.
It'll cover the one, but we then have to have the additional funds for the actual programming and other
Exactly.
services for kids. So we don't want to eat it all up with a personnel position. We want a person who can then use the other resources. And that includes the OST funds that we're receiving through that separate allocation.
Right. So that I do appreciate that. That is very helpful for me to understand. I don't want the ADF fund to be absorbed by the 3 positions.
No, it isn't.
So I just want to make sure that. And then the other thing is I just want to make sure that that the reason I'm a little hesitant is because Dr. Powers, there's a vague sense that you may have to cut 1 or 2 positions. We don't know. And would these funds still be available? And those 1 or 2 positions might be teachers in the classroom. And if I remember correctly, you said you want to make cuts as far away from the classroom. I guess that's where I'm coming from.
We're not looking at cutting any teaching positions at all, except possibly half of 1 position that's already vacant or will be vacant. And that's because of a curriculum change. The teacher that previously held that position, or as holding it now actually, is no longer to be teaching something that we had included in that department. We've done away with that particular program, so that frees up that teacher or that position to not be encumbered for that. We would keep the same number of sections across the board, pretty much so, through all of our areas. That's if we don't see a huge surge in enrollment. If we get a huge surge in enrollment, that's fine. We get money further down the road, but then we have to make sure we have enough teachers to not expand our class sizes too greatly. So basically what's happening in the classrooms should be pretty much even. There's very little fluctuation there. We're looking at ways in which we can have savings around that core of the teachers and counselors, any of the certified staff.
So thank you. I appreciate that. So the last comment I'm going to make is this commitment, and I do see the humanity and the value in the 3 positions and the support that they offer to the school. And what I want to emphasize here is the commitment that we have to these 3 positions and the value that they have and the value that they bring, that we extend those commitments to the various things that we have talked about today, from the dean of students to the culture, to providing the necessary support for our students after an incredibly hard and challenging year plus.
Yes.
So thank you so much, Dr. Powers.
We're committed to that.
Okay, I think I'm going to make a motion. Are you guys ready? You can vote no. You can do whatever you want. I got to find, where's my document? I'm sorry. Oh, here it is. I'm going to make a motion to approve from 124 funds the 3 positions as indicated on the Jones College Prep fiscal year 2022 budget draft.
I second the motion.
Okay, let me find my minutes. Let me do a roll call. Bowman.
Yay.
Boyd.
Yay.
Colonel Prado.
Yay.
Cresswell.
No.
Hilbrands.
Yay.
Ma, yay. Martin Sec.
Abstain.
MacArthur.
Yay.
And Javar.
Based on Dr. Powers' thoughtful and thorough explanation and his commitment to the various demands and requests made by this LSC and the students who have spoken today and previously, I will vote yes.
Powers.
Yes.
Zen.
Yes.
Okay. Troy. Not Troy. Wait. You can breathe. You don't have to go beyond the deadline. All right. Cassie.
Sarah, you forgot me.
Oh my gosh, I did? I looked at your
No
name.
worry.
Bugs.
Yes, abstain.
Abstain. Okay. Oh my goodness. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, let's set this other meeting at 6 p.m. on Monday anyway. Even though it does not make a difference for the Monday deadline, I think it's a better thing to do. So that will be our special meeting at 6 p.m. on Monday. With that in mind, if there's stuff that can wait till Monday, then we can do it then. Anything that we haven't covered on this agenda.
May I make a recommendation for the Monday meeting that we try to focus the as much as we can to get the budget decision, maybe shorten the amount of time for public participation if necessary, just so that we're not starting an hour and a half or 2 hours into the meeting to then get to the budget. Given, again, especially given our deadline and everything, I'm very confident we can reach a consensus by that meeting on Monday.
I think we're going to need quite a bit of detail. That is the thing that is really the linchpin in our ability to do that. So
I think, we could put public comment at the end. It's, I don't love that, but
it's going to depend how much information we have. Like if someone's position is being cut and they want to come speak, we need to let them speak before we vote. I think that's it. So it's going to kind of depend what the budget looks like in part. So the more information.
I have to reiterate, I cannot inform someone that their position's being cut. CPS policy is CPS does the notification. We put it in the budget or we put it in the Hyperion system, and then CPS sends out the notification, and then I may do that. And that's at the end of the school year. And that is a CPS policy of long standing. So, I mean, that's why I've been trying to be a little bit diplomatic about where some of this might happen and how it might happen. Also, there are some moving parts here. If we have a resignation in a certain area, we might not have to cut a position in that area. And it's non-teaching. I'm not trying to be coy. I'm just trying to follow what I've had to follow for the past 13 years in terms of notifications of what are called impacted positions. And that's all very strictly governed by CPS policy, and I guess the contract agreement as well with employees.
Yes, but so I'm just saying that if there's stuff that impacts people in the budget, if class size has to go up and someone wants to speak about that, they need to speak.
We're not talking about any teacher cuts. None.
Yes. So we just want to make sure that we have that information. We're not just voting on faith. That's the
I understand that.
So as long as you can say, yes, we have that information.
We're not cutting any teaching positions.
Yes, we need to see this stuff. That is the whole point of our role, is to oversight of the budget. So if we don't have the details, it'll be very difficult. Those details, as much as possible, can be made available on Friday for a budget committee meeting. That will be very helpful. And they will really need to be made available in order to approve the budget on Monday. So that is just what I'm trying to make clear. That everyone has that clarity before we close this evening.
Can I ask, Jeremy, what is it exactly you're going to be able to provide that will provide that level of detail? We're talking about a list of positions, essentially.
I can provide as much as I'm directed to. We would have names, salaries, positions. I mean, I don't know if
a
it's
budget
an open
discussion
meeting.
should not, like you can have salaries and positions, but you're not supposed to put the names on it, even though obviously in like small departments, you know who is who. But our discussion is not a personnel discussion, it's a position discussion. And so, it's supposed to be tied to that.
Well, we can present that with the statement that none of those positions are being cut. And after the budget is submitted is when we do the school organization worksheet, and CPS sends that out. And then that is due that's due the 29th of May. And we will not receive that until the 26th of May. And that's where we go ahead and we plug in and update all of our positions. And everyone who is on there either will be, no change, or the change will be a new person is going to be filling that position. That's with regard to the teaching position.
Yes. Thanks. Does anyone have, for the reports, Denia, do you want to cover any of your stuff this evening? The PBLC said no already. Health and safety, do you have specific questions that need to be answered tonight, Rachel, in order to be prepared for next week for the student forum?
The student forum is going to be held on May 26th. And so the only thing that I was going to say is just Mr. Mitchell kind of spoke to the whole school safety committee and kind of bringing the work of the student forum on school safety in line with the whole school safety plan, which is what the LSC is going to be presented with in June. Just like getting everyone aware that that's kind of what's on the docket to come. CPS has asked everyone, every school, to come up with a safety plan. So just kind of making us do less work all around and seeing where we can collaborate.
Can I ask a quick question? Rachel, what time is the student forum on the 26th?
Sure, yeah. The student forum is going to be at 6 p.m. and it's going to be on Zoom.
Okay, that is the evening of our virtual senior honors convocation starting at 7. So I just wanted to make everyone aware of that. That's been on the calendar for some time.
Okay, that's good to know. Yeah, I mean, this is something that during May, I think there's so many things going on. There's like AP testing as well. So that's really good to know. And I would like maybe the meeting to be, or it would be great if student facilitators want the meeting to be shorter rather than longer. But thank you. That's good to know.
Very good. I just want to make sure we coordinate. Thank you very much.
As far as the student report goes, I understand everybody wants to log off. I just really want everybody, at least on the LSC, to go in and read the letter that's linked in the first point of my report. And basically, it's a student talking about not only the workload that they've personally felt this year, but about just the general Jones selective enrollment culture. And this is my second to last meeting. The next regular meeting will be my last. So I'd really want everybody to read that so I can talk about it next time, because I think it's something that's really important. And I did sort of like pinky promise that I would talk to the LSC in depth about that point. And then the second point, which is more of a general like equity update as far as the Discord incident went, which I mean, I'm assuming we're going to get an update about that like sooner or later, but I really wanted to put it on the agenda because several students said that the communication about that sort of dropped off, and that they were a bit confused on how that ended.
Yeah. And I can respond to that to some degree, Denia. Basically, the investigation of that is all in the hands of CPS, Safety and Security, and Chicago Police Department. So it's essentially moved out of the school's hands, and they're investigating that. But I have not heard an update on it.
Okay, that's nice to know. Thank you.
Could you make a request from Chief Chow to get us an update?
We can do that. Yeah.
Because yeah, parents have the same questions that students do on that.
Yeah. Mr. Mitchell can make that contact, or I can do that. Yeah.
Thanks. And did we determine whether any of the $2,500 things are urgent for this evening, or can they wait until Monday?
Hey, Cassie, this is Roberto. I do have an update on the equity committee. The LSC's equity. It's a quick update. Okay, so I submitted a report of, so the equity committee is launched into this research of dean of students, directors, and coordinators. I submitted a document to the LSC. I'm not sure if that was uploaded to the shared drive, but it lists over 23 individuals who fill that role. And on Thursday, we will be presenting at the LSC Equity Committee meeting a very detailed research report on the Dean of Students. from various CPS high schools. And we will be submitting that to the LSC and the administration to strongly consider including in the budget. So we've been hard at work. This was a request from Dr. Plunkett and Mr. Mitchell to figure out what are the roles and responsibilities and outcomes of these deans of students. So we have several equity members who jumped on this and were willing to do the legwork. And so we'll be presenting that information. And then I believe Mr. Mitchell is going to be providing an EOS update. We have asked, I think this LSE has asked for the EOS raw data and the reports, any preliminary and final reports from the EOS. I have not received a follow-up, and I also sent Mr. Mitchell a request for that. So I would appreciate it if the administrative leadership team could provide me and this LSE the raw data for the EOS. And that's the Equal Opportunity School.
During the presentation on Thursday, Mr. Menjivar, I'll give you an update. I'll give you the context, and then shortly thereafter, you'll be supplied with the data that you are requesting.
Thank you.
Thanks. And Retro, your meeting is at 6:30 on Thursday, right? That's the next.
That is correct. This Thursday at 6:30 p.m.
Thanks. And health and safety is next week on Thursday. And the letter that Denaya spoke about, I think some of those topics will be on the agenda that evening too. Okay. And do any of the approvals need to be voted on this evening, or can they wait till next Monday?
From my perspective, the only one that's kind of urgent is the parking one, as it pertains to May parking for the staff. I can't speak. I know Adobe can probably wait, and I think Parallax can probably wait, and I don't know much about the Vernier one, but Ms. Martinsek may.
Yeah, so that would definitely be in use next school year. It's not urgent for the next month.
Okay, so parking. Do we always pay this much for parking?
We do, but we usually have it supplemented by staff paying for parking, which they have not done this year.
So this is kind of like a this year, and then next year they'll go back to paying for their parking?
Right, at the beginning of the year, when it's time to sort out all the parking mess, there's usually a fee assessed to each staff member, which covers the supplemental parking at our building.
So we should expect to see another invoice for June similar to this one,
Correct.
but not in the summer.
Correct, but starting again in the fall for this amount or more, depending on how many more people decide to park. And potentially our fee for staff will go up because we need to cover those costs.
Okay, so, all right, so this is a COVID-friendly gesture. Okay, thank
That's
you.
a great way of putting it.
We have the opportunity, we could do all of the motions in one. I could do one motion for all check requests. Okay. Okay, I'm roll calling. Hopefully, does anyone have any comments?
Hey, Sarah, let's just make it clear. This is the approval for the legacy parking, $4,030, the mini lab quest for $5,430.79, and the computer science robots for $3,687.30. Those are the three approvals.
And
Correct.
the Adobe Cloud for $7,532.75.
Perfect. Thank you.
And the science one, I feel like I had a different number in my chart. Just want to get that on the record, which is, no, you said it right, $5,430.79. I didn't do the shipping. Okay. Okay. I will take a roll call. Bowman.
Yay.
Boyd.
Yay.
Bugs.
Yes.
Serna Prado.
Yes.
Cresswell.
Yes.
Hernandez or Hillbrands.
Yay.
Ma, yay. Martinsek,
Yay.
MacArthur,
Yes.
Menjivar,
Yay.
Powers,
Yes.
Zen.
Yes.
Okay, we have all those, so Cassie can sign those check requests and send them over. Woo.
And then when you have a time, Rachel, definitely share it with the whole LSC for the budget committee for Friday. Okay, I think we are done with our items for the next meeting, and anything not covered, we can cover basically as part of the next meeting. Okay, so seeing no additional business, we are adjourned.
Night, everyone.
Take care. Be safe.